empty hands, dreams untold, but they build a fire, made the embers glow from the soil, a spark to grow. Factories hum, the future's begun, rivers of steel under the sun. Red dawn rising, the world's in awe, breaking the chains, rewriting the law. From the mountains to the sea, a new age of unity. Red dawn rising, lifting us all. One great leap, no step too small. Fields of gold, where deserts used to sprawl. Bridges reaching, breaking walls. Wisdom ancient, dreams of modern skies. Together we rise. Together we Lanterns burn bright, lighting the night, marching as one, hearts take flight. Red dawn rising, the world's in awe, breaking the chains, rewriting the law. From the mountains to the sea, a new age of unity. Red dawn rising, lifting us all. One great leap, no step too small.
He was sipping his soda, head in the clouds. When the phone lit up, it was ringing loud. A voice on the line, deep and slow, said, "Nick, my boy, it's time to go. Pack up your thoughts, your slogans too. There's a new agenda waiting for you." He got the call, oh, he got the call from the man with the hat and the wall. He said, "Jump," and Nick said, "How tall?" Oh, he got the call, yeah, he got the call. The voice said, "Nick, we got plans to unfold. You'll be a hero, so brave, so bold, so bold." Nick scratched his head, but the money was sweet. He traded his stance for a brand new beat. Change your tune, put on a show. You'll love the perks, just let it flow. He got the call, oh, he got the call from the man with the charts and the sprawl. He said, "Run," and Nick said, "I'll crawl." Oh, he got the call, yeah, he got the call. He was sipping his soda, head in the clouds. When the phone lit up, it was ringing loud. A voice on the line, deep and slow, said, "Nick, my boy, it's time to go. Pack up your thoughts, your slogans too.
from the man with the hat and the wall. That's a good line. Oh, that's a good line by me. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Eddie Liger Power Hour. We're back with another episode. We're going to be talking about Stalin. We're going to be talking about some stupid video game stuff that some people might find interesting. Political, of course. Answering the biggest and most pressing questions of video game politics, of which there are many. So we'll do that and talk about Stalin a little bit. I have a couple of videos to react to. We'll talk about the Russian drones or allegedly Russian drones that ended up in Poland, and whether that was a false flag event or an accident. And regardless, NATO is using it to increase military buildup near Russia's borders. What else is new? There's some patterns in geopolitics you guys might have noticed, like NATO trying to build up their military and reach that military to Russia's borders. That's one of these patterns that you'll notice. So yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit. Talk about my USSR CCCP hockey jersey. This thing's pretty sweet, isn't it? I got this for like $10. And I got this before Jackson was rocking the CCCP jersey. I did not copy Jackson. He's got a blue one that looks sick as hell, by the way. But yeah, comradely greetings from Moscow. What up? Good afternoon, Revolution, and good afternoon, our dear comrades. Absolutely. I see people in the chat already saying, oh, I need to turn off ads. Good call. Let me do that before we start anything. One of these days, I'll figure out how to get YouTube to stop automatically putting ads on my live. One day. Okay, we're good. See people saying, rest in peace, Assata Shakur. Yes, absolutely. Rest in peace to her, great American revolutionary hero. For those who don't know the story, Assata Shakur, I can't remember what her name was before she changed it, but she was a member of the Black Panther Party, one of the most successful and popular revolutionary parties in American history, a party that really captured the zeitgeist of Black America at the time, and was pushing all the right things, discipline, organization, strategy, education, all these good things. They wouldn't let people show up to meetings like high out of their minds, which was very important during the time that they were around, especially in the 70s, because you had the hippie movement and this, let's just smoke weed together and that'll bring about world peace, man. And the Panthers were like, nah, that's stupid as shit. We should be disciplined and organized. And, if you're going to smoke weed, do it at home. Don't do it when you show up to get shit done. So they had the right ideas for sure. And she was involved in a shooting. I can't remember where it was. It was like the Oklahoma Turnpike or something. It was on some highway. I can look it up. She was involved in a shootout between state troopers and the Black Liberation Army, which was common. It was common for the police and state troopers to harass and be violent towards Black Panther Party members or Black Liberation Army members. And they would be, the police would try to provoke them into violence. And then, of course, if something violent would go down, even if there were like 3 Panthers killed and no police killed, the courts would use that to jail the Panthers on trumped up charges. This is pretty basic leftist American history. Most people know this. Most Americans know this. But Assata Shakur was one of the people. It was the New Jersey Turnpike. Yeah, I don't know why she would be in Oklahoma. I'm a fucking idiot. It was the New Jersey Turnpike. The Oklahoma Turnpike's probably the most famous turnpike, so that's why I thought of that. She was in New Jersey, and just like I said, a Black Liberation Army member was killed, and Assata Shakur was shot in that event. And there was also a state trooper who was killed, I believe, but it was very controversial. Most people believed that her charges were trumped up. And unlike Angela Davis, she wasn't able to face them in court and basically get acquitted of the charges. Instead, possibly more badass even than what Angela Davis did at the time, Assata Shakur was broken out of prison in 1979. Other members of the Black Liberation Army busted her out of prison, which, guys, now that we have our own party, now that we have the ACP, right, and we're all in this organized group together, this actually existing political force in the real world, how crazy is that to bust one of your members out of prison? Like, imagine doing that in real life. Your party member gets, and of course, you know, we always follow the law. The ACP has never done anything like that, but one of your members is put in prison wrongfully on trumped up charges, and you literally break them out. And then she was exiled to Cuba, fled to Cuba, and of course, the Cubans, being the based kings that they are, gave her asylum. And just like Fidel Castro, Assata Shakur lived a long life under the nose of the U.S. empire and died of old age despite their efforts to imprison her or even to kill her. So very based, very inspirational figure here in the United States, someone who we can learn from. There's so much to learn from the Black Panther Party. That video I did about the Black Panthers and what we can learn from Charlie Kirk, or what we can learn from them about how to handle Charlie Kirk's assassination, that did really well on Instagram. People are always interested in learning about the Panthers. It did well on TikTok too. Those are on the ACP main pages, which you should be following. Just thought, like, it's the same shit that you're seeing now. Charlie Kirk gets assassinated, and all these right-wing grifters come out and say it's the left, it's Antifa. And it's always these broad, amorphous definitions, right? It is specifically the people calling for political violence who we want to crack down on. It is specifically the people saying that Charlie Kirk's killing was justified. And even that would be a violation of the First Amendment, in my opinion. You shouldn't have to mourn people. You shouldn't be forced to mourn people by the state. But even then, it's not people saying that. It's the left, full stop. It's Antifa, full stop, which doesn't have a headquarters, which isn't a real disciplined and organized organization. So what they're going to do, what the Trump administration will do, is use that to put anybody in a Palantir database or jail anybody or suppress anybody who they deem to be the left or anti-fascist, because there's no Antifa membership cards, right? You can prove that somebody's a part of the ACP. They're in our, blockchain, right? You can't prove that somebody's a member of Antifa. It's not a real, concrete, existing, disciplined organization with a structure. It's just like an ideology. People call themselves Antifa and then show up to protests and throw rocks at right-wingers. So they can say it's the left, it's Antifa, and we need to crack down on all of them. And they're using, ironically, Charlie Kirk's memory to push for this. And I saw even Joe Rogan calling this out. You know it's bad if Joe Rogan has to call you out and you're on the right. They're using Charlie Kirk's memory to call for crackdowns on speech, on the left, on Antifa, full stop, whatever the hell that means. And what they're going to do is the same thing they did with the Panthers. Okay, so this is what happened with the Panthers. Sorry, I'll play the intro in a bit. I'm on a roll here. This is what happened with the Panthers. You had all these groups that ended up being COINTELPRO infiltrated. They were infiltrated by the CIA and the FBI through Operation Chaos and Operation COINTELPRO and even MK Ultra and all these different things that they were doing during that time. You had like the Symbionese Liberation Army. You had the Weather Underground. And these were violent. You had, maybe some of you aren't ready for this conversation, but Jim Jones and the People's Temple, a lot of CIA fingerprints all over that whole deal. But anyways, you had all these CIA infiltrated left-wing groups who were hyper-terroristic and hyper-militant. And they would commit acts of adventurism. They would go out and kill people. They would do something like shoot Charlie Kirk and say, oh, we did it. The left has won. When in reality, all they were doing was provoking more state crackdowns on behalf of the CIA. The CIA and the FBI were encouraging this from within, and they'd still do this. They actually infiltrate a lot of right-wing groups and like militia groups nowadays too. There's pretty much FBI members and CIA members crawling in all of those. And they do encourage them to get more violent. So then the CIA member can say, look, I busted this violent group. Give me a promotion. It's pretty wild. They're probably FBI when it comes to domestic groups nowadays. But anyways, so the state, even though the Panthers repeatedly, there's a video of Fred Hampton distancing himself from the Weather Underground and saying they're adventuristic, they're anarchistic, they're undisciplined. We're giving an example of how you should organize, and it's much different from them. We're focusing on education and organization. They're focusing on senseless violence and taking young people who are excited and fired up about revolution, putting them in bad situations where they could get shot by encouraging them to take these adventuristic activities. So the Panthers were against it from the beginning, but what did the state do? What did the courts and the police and the government do? Well, they said the Panthers, they're just like these Weather Underground folks. They're just like the Symbionese Liberation Army. They're just like Jim Jones' People's Temple. So the one group that wasn't controlled by the CIA, the one group that actually did have a vision for the future of the country and a vision of construction, was demonized as an extremist terrorist group, while the extremist terrorist groups would coincidentally always get let off the hook. The courts would always let them go at the last minute because they were CIA assets. So this is what's happening with the Charlie Kirk assassination. They're going to say, oh, you ACP guys, you're the same as these anarchist leftists committing acts of violence and terror for no reason. And you're seeing it now. And some people are too stupid to see it, and they don't get it. What do you think happened to Flight 93? All right. I made a bunch of TikToks about 9/11 this weekend. But I wasn't actually allowed to give my own opinions because it's TikTok and they'll ban you for anything. But let me play the intro real quick, and then I will answer that question and any other 9/11 related questions you guys have. All right, be back in 2 minutes, 18 seconds.
High Sheriff Hazard is a hard man to be. High Sheriff is his only plan. He digs through pockets, takes what he can, for he's High Sheriff Hazard. He caught me one evening, and here's what he said: you look like a Russian, you look like a red. And if you're fond of your skin and your head, beware the High Sheriff of Hazard.
All right. Not Tower 7. United 93. Different thing. Eddie is based. Thank you, comrade. United Flight 93. Now, this was the flight that crashed down in Pennsylvania. It was the one that was headed for the White House. And allegedly, the official story, you can tell me if this sounds believable to you or not, this is the official story, is that the passengers, including a guy named Todd Beamer, decided to take the plane back from the hijackers and crash it into the ground so that it wouldn't hit its intended target. So they figured out in the plane that they were a part of a terrorist attack and that the plane was going to crash into the White House. Not sure how they figured that out. Looking back at the story, it makes sense. Like, oh yeah, of course they knew the plane was going to attack the White House. It was 9/11 and all the plane attacks were happening, but they didn't know about that yet. Nobody could even imagine something like this happening yet. They were up in the air. Anyway, sorry. I got to stop poking holes in the official narrative. Let me just give it to you. So Todd Beamer and the other passengers of the jet decided to take over the plane from the hijackers. They did. Todd Beamer said, "Let's roll." That was his catchphrase. And they stormed up to the front and they beat the shit out of these Al-Qaeda guys with a fire extinguisher and whatnot. And then the Al-Qaeda guys lost control and the plane crashed into the ground. Let's pull up a picture. Okay, now I'm not going to get into all the radar and satellite data. You can watch full lectures on that if you want. It's all quite technical and boring. One sec. Compared to what I'm going to give you. Okay. But this is where the plane crashed, and even on its face, okay, even on its face, plane crash experts were confused about this. I watch a lot of plane crash videos. I'm so weird, guys. I watch plane crash videos before I get on flights. I don't know why. I don't know what's wrong with me. It's some kind of morbid curiosity. But truly, I like watching plane crash videos before I get on flights. It excites me. It gets my adrenaline going. I don't know why. But anyways, there are a lot of plane crash experts, people who investigate these things after they happen. And a lot of the experts who weren't tied to the U.S. government and the 9/11 Commission said this doesn't look right. For one, there's not a big enough crater in the ground. If the plane was fully intact and then crashed into the ground, there would be a much bigger crater than this. You can see there's not much of a crater at all, given what happened. So what they suspected, what they said this is more reminiscent of, is a plane that shot out of the sky. A plane that crashes straight into the ground makes a giant crater in the earth. A plane that shot out of the sky stops flying, right, stops accelerating before it crashes. So it doesn't make as big of a crater when it falls. And plane crash experts said there's not much of a crater there. This looks like it was shot out of the sky. Not only that, but the debris was found for up to 2 to 3 miles away from where the crash happened. And again, people who do this full time, who look at these plane crashes every single day and are paid to investigate them, were like, again, that's not what happens when a plane crashes into the ground. That's what happens when a plane falls from the sky. That's what happens when a plane is shot down. When a plane is shot down, the parts go much farther, obviously, because it's being shot. So what people who believe the mainstream narrative will tell you is that, well, for this plane, the black box was actually found. This is if you listen to any 9/11 skeptics, you know that they'll always say, well, they apparently found one of the hijackers' passports in the rubble in New York at Ground Zero, but they didn't find the black boxes, which are specifically designed to survive plane crashes so that investigators can figure out what happened afterwards. It has flight records and then audio records of all the transmissions between the cockpit and the, whatever you call it, the guy in the tower. Okay. But for this flight, this was the one flight where the black box actually was found. The black box was recovered for United Flight 93. However, a lot of people believe, because of the movie United 93, which then became a very popular film. It's a Paul Greengrass movie, the same guy who did the Jason Bourne movies. I think it's called United 93. That movie is based off of the black box transcription. And because of that movie, a lot of people think that the black box audio is actually public and you can listen to it, and it's common knowledge that this happened, you know, or it's easy to confirm that the official narrative actually happened because you can just listen to the black box audio. Not the case. The government never released that audio. They released the flight data, and people pointed to that flight data as another reason why the official story doesn't match up. But they never released the audio. They released a transcript, and only a partial transcript where they took out everything that they wanted. And apparently only the families of survivors were able to actually listen to the black box audio. I don't know if they recreated some audio or actually showed them, you know, some real black box audio footage or whatever you call it. I don't know. But the public never got to hear that black box audio that supposedly exists. So there's no full transcript, and there's no actual audio. So they very, very easily could have edited that transcript to tell this story about the guy, Todd Beamer, saying, "Let's roll." And, you know, on 9/11, when the terrorists attacked us, the Americans got one back on the terrorists because one of those planes didn't hit the White House, its intended target where the president would have been. And the American people stood up for their country and fought back. Right? It was to give Americans a W on 9/11. Almost for sure didn't happen. Almost for sure that plane was shot out of the sky, which, you know, assuming it was actually hijacked by a terrorist and wasn't it wasn't George Bush with a remote controller, which that's not as far-fetched of a theory as you might think. I'm deep into this 9/11 stuff. But if it was an actual hijacker, what was I going to say? I don't remember. If it was, this would have been Americans fighting off the hijacker to save their country. Sorry. I remember what I was going to say. If there was an actual hijacker, the military should have shot the plane out of the sky. Obviously, it was headed for the White House. It was going to crash into the White House. Like, that's what they have to do. So that's what they did. And then, I think, made up this story to give Americans a victory. There's just much too little evidence, actual hard, concrete evidence that the narrative that they give actually happened. That this guy said, "Let's roll," and then they beat up the hijackers and crashed the plane into the ground because they knew it was headed for the White House. There's a bunch of phone calls that were supposedly made. This is the other piece of evidence that they give besides the black box, is they say there were about 40 phone calls that were made on the plane to family members, and people described what they were going to do. They're like, "We're going to take the plane back from the hijackers." But if you've ever been on a plane, you know you can't use your phone on the plane. Nowadays, you can get Wi-Fi, but this was 2001. Do you think the hijackers took over the plane and everybody quick paid for the Wi-Fi and then called their family members? I don't even think the planes had Wi-Fi back then. So that's what I believe happened with United Flight 93. I think it was headed for the White House and they shot it out of the sky, which could have either been, if the plane was some kind of remote control technology controlled by the U.S. government or U.S. intelligence, I think it probably just malfunctioned and wasn't working right, so they shot it down. And if it was terrorists actually flying the plane towards the White House, I think the military just shot it down so it wouldn't hit the White House. But yeah, I agree with Eddie. Yeah, most people who have studied this event closely do. Most people who aren't tied to the government. There's some guy on TikTok who responds to my 9/11 videos. He's some snarky ass lib named Yuval. He is such a douchebag and so wrong about everything. He'll just be like, "The government literally said that this didn't happen, so how can you literally say that it happened?" Okay, yeah, good point, Yuval. These guys who you trust for information are literally conspiracy theorists. I can't debunk a single thing they say, but they're literally conspiracy theorists. They did an investigation, dude. They did a whole ass investigation, literally. You'll make a whole video explaining everything that's wrong with the government's investigation, and then these libs will respond like, but they literally did an investigation. It's like, yeah, that's what I'm saying, dipshit. That I looked through the whole thing and it was wrong. If it's the Yuval I'm thinking of, he's so annoying. It definitely is. I'll show you. We're definitely thinking of the same person. Yuval the Terrible. He is terrible. At least he has a fitting name. This guy. Dude, he sucks. He's got a lot of followers. Let's see.
People have been reacting to the Hannah Brown situation is reminding me that most people don't realize that most conservatives and most people who voted for Trump just look like normal people. I see a lot of people who are really surprised that she went to a Charlie Kirk rally because she makes all of these skits where she plays a waitress or a server who's interacting with a really unreasonable customer. So people assume because she worked.
Are they canceling some girl for going to a Trump rally or a Charlie Kirk event? Oh boy, liberal TikTok is focused on all the right stuff, I tell you. Every time I open TikTok, there's some video with 100,000 views, and they're like, here's what I think about the Hannah situation. So literally, she went to a Charlie Kirk event, and then it's the most benign event and the most surface level basic analysis you've ever heard in your life. So here's what I think about it. We literally shouldn't be trusting white people so much because they're literally coming into our spaces with white skin and they should be shot. That's what you get when you open TikTok.
In the service industry that she was going to be left-leaning. And now that the opposite has been revealed, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, maybe in those skits, she was actually making fun of the waitress character. And that's obviously not true. There's no way.
I don't even know
Things happen by accident and on purpose. Not on accident.
Quick question. Why? Why is on accident incorrect? I mean, we don't have a governing body in English telling us what is and is not good language.
Okay, whatever. I can't find any good examples of why he's an idiot. If I could find his 9/11 response to me, I would, but it's way back. Way back. Here he is about Ethan Klein and Hassan. This will give us an idea of what he's like.
Strange watching people recap the Ethan Klein-Hassan debate this past week because everyone's either collectively lying or no one actually watched the live stream. I have to imagine it's just because of the out-of-context clips that Hassan posted that people think Hassan won the debate. Because if you actually sit down and watch the debate, you'd be hard-pressed to find any instances in which Ethan is in the wrong. For example, very early on in the debate,
now you get what this Yuval guy is like. Now you get what this motherfucker is like. There's very few times where ultra-Zionist Israeli Ethan Klein was wrong in this genocide debate. Okay, buddy. Okay, lib. Blue MAGA.
Ethan Klein's just kidding. Anyways, my friend Ahmed is still trying to raise money to help his family of 20 get out of Gaza. Most of whom, again, are children. They've managed to raise some money so far on their new GoFundMe, but they're still...
Oh, never mind. He was lying. He tricked us, you guys. He was raising money for Gaza. Okay, well, I can't shit on this guy. He tricked me. Damn you, Yuval. You got me again. All right, whatever. He must not be that bad. The depressed speed talking style is popular nowadays. Maybe it is. Maybe I need to start filming my TikToks at like 1 a.m. I think that. Literally. Should have read the comments. Yeah, I should have gotten a spoiler alert there. Oh well. Okay, guys, we need to talk about something very important. Actually, let's talk about the actual news first before I get into the silly shit I want to talk about today.
Poland has triggered NATO's
article for. We're gonna listen to neoliberal propaganda.
Poland has triggered NATO.
The number one purveyor of misinformation on TikTok, Philip DeFranco, who never seems to get banned. I've been banned 7 times for saying things that were objectively true. Meanwhile, he spreads at least 3 points of misinformation in every video, and this video we're about to watch is no different. Every single video he does about the news has misinformation in it because he just repeats whatever the U.S. State Department is saying, which will eventually be disproved. But TikTok never punishes him despite having a community guideline against misinformation. This motherfucker said that Russia blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. He said that Russia bombed their own pipeline, and that video is still up to this day. Meanwhile, people like me are getting banned for misinformation because we tell the truth about the war in Ukraine. But anyways, if you didn't hear, some Russian jets flew over an island in Estonia, and some Russian drones, decoy drones made of foam, landed in Poland, allegedly. And NATO is using that as justification for more military buildup. They've increased their military presence in eastern Poland. Now, was this an accident or a false flag event? I don't know. It was one or the other. Either Russia accidentally let some fake drone decoys drop into Poland, or NATO staged this event in order to justify more military buildup in Poland. Either way, as with most events like this where we don't know exactly what happened, the result is the same. NATO is using this to increase military buildup and continue hostilities with Russia, and to try to turn this war in Ukraine really into a full-on world war is what NATO's approaching here. Because if Russia were to attack Poland, that would mean that NATO would be pulled in to a conflict, which would mean World War III. And Philip DeFranco wants nothing more than World War III. This guy is just begging for World War III to start. He loves NATO. He simps for them every single day. He lies for them to millions of people on TikTok every day. And he's pushing us closer to a global conflict that could kill us all. So shout out to him. But watch this.
Was Article 4 after Russia attacked them, or at the very least violated their airspace with 19 drones last. Or after Poland has triggered NATO's Article 4 after Russia attacked them, or at the very least violated their airspace with 19 drones last night, though that number is expected to grow. And so the alliance will now consult together to
It did not grow.
determine if it's time for war with Russia. Or with it reported that wave after wave of Russian drones entered Poland yesterday, leading
Wave after wave of Russian drones, says Philip DeFranco. Wave after wave. The Polish people were just bombarded by drones. Except no, that's a load of shit. It was 19 to 23 decoy drones that were made out of foam, and they didn't hurt anything. Not one piece of infrastructure, not one military target was hit or destroyed. Most of these drones were literally made out of foam. They were made out of foam. They were decoys. So it was either an accident or a NATO staged event in order to justify more military buildup in Poland. But there's the first lie that he tells. There was only one wave of drones, and they were all decoys. But he has to make it sound like the people of Poland are under attack from the big bad Russia, just like they were from Germany in World War II. And that's why Putin is Hitler, and we got to go to war for NATO. Fucking Ozempic-ridden jackass. He is such a shameless liar, dude. I could tell he's on some weird pharmaceuticals, too, because he got that Ozempic face.
the Polish Air Force joined with the Dutch and Italian Air Forces to shoot them down. One of Russia's drones even had a home in Poland. And with
No, it didn't. No, it didn't. You're a fucking liar.
all this, you had
You
Congressman
lie
Joe Wilson say
on the app where I've been banned for
forces to shoot
misinformation,
down.
and you never get in trouble, you jackass.
One of Russia's drones even had a home in Poland.
No, it didn't. It was hit by a NATO aircraft. NATO fired a missile allegedly to shoot down these drones, and it hit a house. So not only was it not Russia, but it's NATO, the people you're defending and trying to make out to be the good guys. That house was not hit by a Russian drone. You're a liar. You're a liar. And look, 800,000 likes. This is the app where I've been banned 7 times for misinformation. That TikTok can't actually explain how it's misinformation. But this blatant misinformation, this blatant fucking lie, this easily disprovable lie is still up with 850,000 likes. This is how it works, everybody. This is how they control these social media platforms, through the algorithms, through censorship, right? It's not even usually government censorship. It's from the tech oligarchs. It's from the people who own these social media platforms, who get to decide what's misinformation and what's not. And it's always an inversion of reality.
And with all this, you had Congressman Joe Wilson saying Russia is attacking NATO ally Poland with Iranian drones. This is an act of war. You had the German foreign minister saying today that Russia has escalated and they are not ready for diplomacy. So
right, comrade CJ? He's got to be on Ozempic or something. He looks like his skin is like stretched over his face. Looks like Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs.
NATO will have to give a strong response. They also said that Russia did this intentionally. Right, and the highlight of last night, if there is any, is that it was 2 a.m. in Poland and NATO immediately sprung into action. Right, the Dutch immediately got to Poland, the Italians as well, and then the Germans and French arrived almost instantly. But that also is, so far, there's been no mention of the US even showing up. And so at the very least, NATO showed what a well-oiled machine it was when the...
I'm sorry, guys. I couldn't hold in my disgust there as I watched a grown man suck off NATO. A grown man who's supposed to be a political analyst just getting on his knees and blowing NATO in front of the world. The people who destroyed Libya, the people who destroyed Serbia, these disgusting freaks who don't want to let any country in the world be economically independent and want to colonize the entirety of the world outside of the West. It's just so gross to watch a man get on his knees and just blow them like a cuck. I mean, holy cow, isn't that disgusting? Look how fast NATO sprung into action. Oh my God. But the thing about Phil is he's a liberal, so he doesn't like Trump. So he does the same thing that mainstream media does. He criticizes Trump from the right. He criticizes Trump from a pro-war perspective. He's like, well, the U.S. wasn't involved. Why didn't the U.S. send their troops and military forces to threaten Russia and create World War III? Man, Trump sure is bad. He's not pushing for World War III and U.S. global domination. What the heck is wrong with the guy? He's making mean tweets and he hasn't started any wars yet. What the heck? I don't know about this. It's the typical enlightened liberal who doesn't criticize Trump for the multitude of things that you could criticize him for, but they criticize him for not being pro-war enough, for not being pro-NATO enough. That's Philip DeFranco's whole shtick. You might as well watch MSNBC, except he reaches a lot of children and young impressionable people, which really pisses me off because you're indoctrinating the youth who are waking up to the fact that people like you are fucking disgusting liars. And also, this is proof right here that your physical body becomes what you are internally. When you are evil and a cuck to NATO and an imperialist and a warmonger and someone who cheers on death and destruction and pillage of foreign countries, your external body starts to reflect that. That's why, John McCain, Meghan McCain, Dick Cheney, Liz Cheney, all these people look the same. Lindsey Graham, they're all just like bulbous, disgusting skinwalkers, okay? And Philip DeFranco has been sucked into that sphere, and now he's becoming a skinwalker, okay? This guy who I used to respect, this guy whose YouTube videos I've been watching since I was a kid, I watched him become a neoliberal skinwalker, and it's quite sad. You look like a skeleton, Phil. You need to read a book and get some help. You're a freak for wanting World War III this bad. God, what a piece of shit. I hate that guy so much. It's because I used to watch him, too, that I hate him so much. It's because he's on the same platform as me. It's because he gets boosted instead of ever getting banned when I can point to blatant points of misinformation that he's spreading. Even though I was banned for misinformation and he never has been. And it's the fact that I've watched him for so many years and that he became this disgusting, disgusting imperialist sellout. The worst kind of politics that you can have. Give me a MAGA conservative on average over a Philip DeFranco liberal any day of the week, dude. Any day of the week. I will convince a MAGA conservative to have a more positive view of communism way before you'll ever convince someone like Philip DeFranco. Because MAGA people, working class conservatives, I should say, not all of MAGA people, but a lot of working class conservatives are at least humble. They're like, I don't really know shit, but I like Trump because I hate the whole political system and he rails against the political system. But they'll actually listen to you. People like Philip DeFranco think they're enlightened. That guy thinks he's smart. He thinks he knows what's going on in the world and that all of his positions are the correct ones. You can't teach a guy like that anything. You can't teach someone who thinks they're smarter than you when they're actually a dumbass anything. It's the Dunning-Kruger effect. Eddie, remember that people running TikTok are Zionists with links to Israel. What did you expect? Sadly, it's the reality we live in, where warmongers like DeFranco are boosted by algos. Yeah, I made a video about this earlier this week. Someone was like, bro, you're shadow banned. And I'm like, yeah, what the hell do you expect? I'm a communist. I've been banned 7 times, too. Hold on, this is crazy, too. We already talked about this once, I think. But TikTok was getting all this pressure for supposedly being anti-Israel, when over the last couple of years, they've hired a bunch of Israeli Unit 8200 agents to run their affairs. And not only is this an organization connected to Israel, but it's a literally an intelligence organization that specializes in cyber warfare. So if you're on TikTok, Israeli cyber warfare agents are controlling what you see. They're controlling who sees my videos. They're controlling who sees Philip DeFranco's videos. And obviously, they're boosting people like him. And this is why we got to share each other in the algorithm. We got to, people make fun of the infrared guys for like boosting their content in the Discord. And it's like, what else should we do? The ruling class is coordinating with each other to suppress us. So why wouldn't we coordinate with each other to boost ourselves? What's wrong with that? It's a very simple strategy. It's a smart strategy. If all you guys boost my content every time you see it come out, more people are going to see it. And it's going to fight back against the algorithmic suppression that we're facing every day. So boost each other's shit. Boost our shit. Always. Thank you, Battle Cossack. Extra medium. Whoa, $50. Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you for that. We are totally people's funded here at Midwestern Marks. No ads, no corporate donors, none of that. Advertisers wouldn't touch us. We're too based. We're too revolutionary. So our funding will always come from you, the audience, and I really appreciate that. We have a Patreon, too, if people want to support us, Midwestern Marks on Patreon, but appreciate all of our super chatters, all of our YouTube members, anybody who's ever given to our project here. Most of that money doesn't go to us. We keep ourselves alive and invest all of our money in the party and the class struggle. We're young. We got time to worry about saving money in retirement a little later. I got the Acorns app. I'll be fine. You just paid for my Acorns investment this month. Thank you. Thank you, Extra Medium. And thank you for being a YouTube member as well. Appreciate that. Battle Cossack. I don't know how much money that is in US dollars, but 500 Argentinian pesos, like 37 American cents. Whatever, we appreciate it anyways. Any little bit helps. Thank you so much, Battle Cossack. Appreciate you very much. Last night I listened to Ha's debate with Groypers. One of them were shaming him for his height without making any arguments and then throwing the N-word probably to get the space taken down. What's the point in debating them? To prove them wrong. I mean, who comes away from that debate that happened last night looking better? Haas or the Groypers? Because what we've been saying is that the Groypers are a bunch of 4chan addicts. It's a bunch of Reddit incels who just want to be edgy and transgressive and racist. And say things that they're not allowed to say, and they don't actually have any plan for construction. They don't actually have any political program for transforming the country or making things better. They're just like edgy 4chan users. And what does that debate show them to be? That debate shows them to be exactly what they are, edgy 4chan users. Haas is trying to have a serious debate about the substance, and the person he's debating is just yelling the N-word and saying that he's short or whatever, anything to deflect from the substance. And when you get them on the substance, you can cook them because they're wrong. Jewish people don't actually run the world. Capitalists run the world. If you want to talk about the Zionist lobby and Zionist influence and how Zionism has preyed upon Judaism and how capitalism has preyed upon Judaism and turned it into this imperialist nationalistic thing in Zionism, we can talk about that. But full stop, people like Bill Gates have a lot of control and power and exploit a lot of people to make wealth, and they're a part of the problem. And if you ignore Bill Gates because he's not Jewish, your ideology is fucking stupid. If you say Bill Gates doesn't have any power because he's not a Jewish man, you're a moron. You're an idiot. And if you can confront the Groypers face to face, you can call them on this. And that, my friends, is exactly why Nick Fuentes is so terrified of debating me or Haas. Terrified of it. Because he knows that he could be cornered on these issues where he is incorrect, where he is wrong. And it would ruin his grift, which is what it is, a grift. But a lot of people are buying into that grift, a lot of young people, because they're discontented with the system. A lot of them are socially alienated and isolated as well. And Nick Fuentes is posturing as being anti-establishment. He is not anti-establishment. We can prove it. If he were ever to debate us, we would prove it. And that's exactly why he doesn't want to, and exactly why we do want to. So that's the point of those debates. For too long, the left has been like, I won't debate fascists. I won't debate right-wingers. I don't platform right-wingers. It's like, why? If you believe in your ideas, if our ideas are so much better than their ideas, why wouldn't we want to have a debate where people can see clearly that our ideas are much more coherent and much more substantive, and we have a response to every single one of their arguments, and they don't have any responses to ours? It's the same reason I went on Jake Shields, and that wasn't a debate. It was just a conversation, but because I could respond to everything that he said, because I know how the system works. It's not just a cabal of Jewish people like, we're going to make it rain today. You know, it's not. It's capitalists extracting profit through paying people less money than the value that they actually make, which is the exploitation that Marx talks about in Capital, but also nowadays through all these methods of trapping people in debt and charging them interest and owning people's land and charging them rent. A lot of the profits are made through rents and debts, completely parasitically without producing anything. That's what's wrong with the system, not Jewish people existing. Or, you know, an outsized number of Jewish people being in the entertainment industry. Okay. We've acknowledged that. What next? Should we ignore people like P. Diddy and not throw them in a gulag just because they're not Jewish? Like, what the hell are you talking about? Such a weird autistic hyperfixation on Judaism. But anyways, that's why we debate them, because they're wrong, and we know how to prove they're wrong. I've listened to Nick Fuentes' stream off and on, not off and on, but occasionally I've listened to Nick Fuentes' stream for like the last 3 years, with the idea in mind that I might have to debate this guy eventually. I should know what he believes. And every single one of his major talking points I could refute, and I know how I would refute. So, yeah. It's good to be able to destroy your ideological enemies. Man, we don't have time to do this sectarian shit. The fascists, Zionists, and Groypers all fighting us, kidnapping us. Don't fight people like Hassan. Did I say anything about Hassan? Hassan should stop talking shit about us, because we're out here fighting the Groypers for him. Midwestern Marx, you stole my super chat, boy. I did. I don't know what you mean by that. I'm sorry, though. Know your enemy, yes. You're still whites on stolen land. The white race needs to go. All right, I'll go. But then you're going to be left with Nick Fuentes because he's Mexican. So I will go and Nick Fuentes can stay. And that's how we fight racism and build socialism. All the whites like me and Jackson Hinkle will leave. And all the browns like Nick Fuentes and his Indian buddy will stay. It's like the land back people have such a weird idealist, noble savage conception of non-white people. They think like all non-white people are hyper liberal, like woke college students who believe or agree with them on everything. Like I live in a primarily black neighborhood. Their positions on LGBTQ issues are not the same as you would find with a woke college student, I promise. But they think that it's going to be like this woke utopia when all the white people go back to Europe. And like everybody's going to be holding hands around like a trans flag, and all the non-white people will be skipping together and eating sweets and just enjoying communism, because that's what it is when the whites leave. I got charged $2, Midwestern Marks. Hey, that's your problem, man. I don't see it. It didn't go to me. I cannot stand land back sloganeers. Nah, it doesn't go any further than the slogan either. It never goes any further than the slogan. I debated that one girl at the Chicago Workers' School event. She asked me if I support land back, and I gave this big explanation. I'm like, well, land back to who? Land back to the working class? Yeah. But land back to one specific racial group because they're from a specific racial group? Like, I don't know. I'd have to learn about the context, right? For like indigenous nations living on reservations, like, yeah, we should give them more land and development, but that's because they're working class. We should give all working class people more land and development. And I don't understand the purpose of racializing it. And, you know, the process of settler colonialism in America is finished. You know, the genocide of the indigenous already happened. And, you know, our society is like 2% indigenous people today. And yes, they should be taken care of and have all the protections that working class people have under socialism. And, you know, even cultural protections as well, protections for their nationality specifically. But I don't understand the point of like hyper racializing it and calling for racial warfare and calling for white people to go back. And, you know, America today isn't what like Palestine is today, where there's an active process of settler colonialism ongoing still. I explained all that. The girl in the audience who was like debating me on it gave no response, left the event, and then tweeted, "I don't get how you can call yourself a communist if you don't support land back." So I gave her all these substantive arguments of why I don't run around screaming land back. Instead of responding to any of those arguments, she left and tweeted, "You're not a communist if you don't support land back." It's literally just like sloganeering. And this is the same thing Lenin was railing against in a lot of his pamphlets. It was like, these people just say slogans. And if you won't agree with their super revolutionary sounding slogan, then they freak out on you and call you a right winger and all this shit. Colonizer mentality. Just keep saying buzzwords, and eventually you'll find an actual argument. Just say you're a colonizer, you're fascist, you know, you're anti-woke, you're a settler. Just keep saying words, and eventually, you know, you'll figure out how to make a coherent line of argumentation for the positions that you believe in. I believe in you. You'll figure it out eventually. Words can be hard, I know. Where did Justin's tweet go? Hashtag land back, that Bezos thing that enriches the indigenous bourgeoisie via privatization of public land. Yeah, and you guys know that's how it was working, right? The NDN collective and all this, they were getting money from people like Jeff Bezos, who were saying we should have this land privatized and given to us because it's indigenous land and it belongs to the indigenous. And it would just be like indigenous Amazon executives or, you know, shareholders connected to Jeff Bezos in the same shareholder group as him. It was a way for corporations to weaponize the indigenous identity in order to get more control of the economy and to privatize land and monopolize resources. Which, of course, you really think Jeff Bezos is funding a real revolutionary liberatory movement in America? No, he's tricking you. Dude, he's using revolutionary slogans to trick you into getting more control and power and wealth. That's how it works, guys. These slogans aren't going to save us. Holy shit. Thank you, Michelle Vincent Corbeau, for the $5 super sticker and for being a Midwestern Marx member and a constant supporter. We appreciate you, brother. Together, we will build the USSR 2.0. Just kidding. We'll build the ASSR, the American Soviet Socialist Republic. We should actually call it that. Midwestern Marx got put in an arm by Johnny Socialism. What does it mean to be put in an arm? Can Johnny Socialism even lift his own arms? I bet you he has bingo arms. You go, bingo, and just flaps. Johnny got really mad at me one time for calling him fat. He said he was 155 pounds or something, and I was like, brother, I've seen pictures of you. If you guys don't know the lore, trust me, there's reason to call this guy fat. There's reason to use ad hominem attacks. He deserves it. If you don't know the lore, consider yourself lucky, on God. I really like the jersey. Nice, thank you. Thank you. All right, one more little video here.
Ways that Russia is basically still the USSR. They still use the same rocket from the Soviet Union. Ways that Russia is basically still the USSR. They still use the same rocket from the Soviet Union to launch people to space. They haven't taken down any monuments to Lenin or communism. They literally have a giant park with a monument to every country that was part of the Soviet Union. Their national anthem is almost exactly the same as the USSR. Most of the tallest buildings were made by Stalin to impress Americans. They still use the same trains, and I don't think they've ever remodeled.
I like how this is a good video, but he's like, they built tall buildings to impress Americans. Like, or they built them to use them. Just the same reason that we build skyscrapers. And yeah, in the context of the Cold War, everything we built and everything they built was kind of in competition with one another. But it's not like they were just building skyscrapers to impress Americans. They were also using them for things. But anyways, this is a good video.
Them. They haven't changed the lights in the hallway to my building since the USSR, and there's still a bunch of grumpy old Soviet people. Ways that Russia is basically still the USSR.
So, and I just thought that was interesting. It's the same. I've talked to some people from Ukraine, mainly wrestlers who fled the war, and they say the same thing. They're like, we go everywhere by train, but it's all trains that the USSR built. We can walk anywhere. We have tons of walking paths, but they were all built by the USSR. So they still have the USSR's infrastructure, and, you know, they still have the spirit of the USSR in their government, in their politics, the same way that they still have this infrastructure around from that era, and they can't really forget it. It's still part of their consciousness in Russia. You know, the same thing goes with their political consciousness, and it's linked to their political consciousness. The fact that all these nice things were built during the Soviet Union, and they're still maintained to this day publicly. You know, the anti-imperialist spirit, the skepticism of the U.S., the rivalry with the U.S., the skepticism of oligarchs and of capitalism. All these things are still around in Russia and even in Putin's government. So I just thought that was an interesting video of this random tourist being like, this is basically still the USSR. And it's like, kind of. Plus, development really slowed in the 90s, right? There was a huge economic collapse. So for at least a decade, not much new shit was being built. And a lot of it's been, you know, revamped under Putin, which is why the U.S. wants to destroy him, because he cracked down on oligarchs and did more social investment. Basically, kind of went more back towards a USSR style economy, really. So, yeah, I just thought that was kind of interesting there. Russia has been moving back towards socialism, especially since the SMO began. Yeah, I mean, that was kind of like a qualitative shift in Russian foreign policy, where it was like, wow, they're really taking on the U.S. head on. I mean, they kind of were in Syria But the U.S. tried to keep their fingerprints off of Syria because they were funding and arming, literal jihadist Al-Qaeda groups, like splinters of Al-Qaeda. So they tried to look as not involved as they possibly could in Syria, and Russia got involved to stop the government from being toppled. I guess that started after the not after the SMO, after the civil war in Ukraine. I was getting my timelines confused there. So that was before the Civil War. But that I wouldn't say wasn't necessarily a direct confrontation, although definitely an indirect confrontation. Ukraine was like a direct confrontation between Russia and NATO, and a qualitative shift in their policy, which, matches with the smaller changes in policy, like Putin's crackdowns on the oligarchs, the reinvestment of Russian natural gas and oil into development that helps the public. These are all things that Putin did that pissed off the US. And when you say this to a lot of leftists, nowadays it's better than what it used to be 2 years ago when I was getting banned on TikTok for saying things that are objectively true. But when you say this to a lot of leftists, I'm like, you're a Putin simp, you're a Putin supporter, how could you support Putin? And it's like, I support the KPRF. I mean, I guess I do support Putin within a certain context, but compared to the communists in Russia, no. I support the communists in Russia. But the communists in Russia also voted for Putin this election because of the good things that he's doing, moving them towards socialism in a way, or a more socialistic foreign policy stance and domestic policy and economic policy. So these are objective facts. These are the kind of facts that I got banned on TikTok in 2023, I believe, for pointing out. And then I got swarmed by leftists for pointing out. But nowadays, more people, I am very optimistic, guys. Like the American political consciousness and even the American left really, really has changed a lot for the better over the last 5 years. There are less people calling me a Putin simp. There are more people who understand the NATO role in the Ukraine war. There are more people who understand why it's a proxy war. There are more people who understand the coup in 2014 and that it was a U.S. orchestrated coup. These are things that I was getting swarmed for saying a couple of years ago that now are more or less common knowledge among the more reasonable sections of the American left. So Putin is consequentially anti-imperialist and globalist, so it's okay to support him. Yeah, exactly. It's like I support him within this specific context of the rising multipolar world, Russia no longer being a communist country anymore, with the Communist Party having a leading role in society. Given that specific context that Putin rose to power in, I do support a lot of what he's doing. It's not gonna... More needs to be done. He still has to deal with these fucking oligarchs and the forces of capital in his country and the forces of foreign capital, who are marching ever closer to his borders. He'll have to confront this, which means that Russia's headed for a confrontation with its socialist past. They can keep edging towards socialism, but if they want to really liberate themselves from imperialism and from capitalism, they're going to have to go all the way. So they're headed for a confrontation with their socialist past. And the Russian communists have a lot to confront there too, because it was due to U.S. sabotage efforts that the USSR fell. Of course, that was one of the factors, but it was also due to corruption and over bureaucratization of the party and leading party members not actually reading Marx and Lenin and not actually giving a shit about communism, just being freaking oafs like Khrushchev. So the communists also need to confront their failures in that country. So very interesting things. It'll be very interesting to see where Russia goes in the future. Some people I know are more pessimistic about it. Shout out to my boy Ruslan, very brilliant young Marxist thinker from Turkey. And some people are more optimistic about it, like our boy Jackson. KPRF is Stalinist again, which is a W. That's a huge win, dude. That is actually such a big win that cannot be understated. The KPRF needs to be pro-Stalin. That's even more important than us being pro-Stalin as American communists, right? Because we have a lot of propaganda to see through. It's hard to debunk all these narratives about Stalin for Americans. Sometimes you just want to avoid the Stalin talk. It'll come up eventually, right? If you're talking about communism with people, eventually you'll have to defend Stalin. And you'll blow people's minds telling them all the good things that he actually did. But at the end of the day, he's not an American. Americans generally want to hear about like Abe Lincoln and George Washington and American heroes. Stalin is a Russian hero. And like 75% of Russians think that he was the greatest leader the country ever had because he brought them into the modern world and industrialized them and then defeated the Nazis in the Great Patriotic War, which is what World War II is called in Russia. So for the KPRF to accept Khrushchev's secret speech and reject Stalin is what the Chinese call national historical nihilism. It's when you reject your own history, you say all of our own history was bad, and in doing so, you hand over the country's history to the right wing, who can then manipulate that history and say all of our country's heroes were one of us. They were right-wingers. And look, leftists hate the country's heroes. Aren't they nihilists, and they hate our own country and they want to just burn it to the ground? Right. This is what's been happening. Americans should be very, very familiar with the effect of national historical nihilism, because we've been dealing with that in America and the American left for decades now. Abraham Lincoln was a colonizer. Abraham Lincoln was a settler. The American Revolutionary War was fought to uphold slavery, even though there's absolutely no evidence of that. Nothing good ever happened in American history. MLK and the Civil Rights Revolution aren't worth celebrating because other Americans were racist at the time. You know, because some Americans were racist, we can't cheer for the Americans who fought against racism. Because some Americans owned slaves, we can't celebrate the Americans who fought and died, sacrificed their own lives to fight against slavery. That's national historical nihilism, and that's what permeates the American left. And this is why we had to fight such an intense struggle over patriotic socialism. And, you know, again, this is an area where the American left is so much better than it was 5 years ago, where you have more patriotic communists. Now, you also have people like DSA who call themselves patriotic socialists, and actually it is chauvinistic because they want to work within the system and don't actually want to revolutionize the American system that leads to all this brutal imperialism. But the communist proletarian revolutionary patriotism that we preach is very important for communists. You need to embrace your country's heroes who pushed the country forward into a new era, who fought against the antiquated, outdated systems like slavery. And in the USSR, that's what the secret speech, Khrushchev's secret speech, did with Stalin. It badmouthed Stalin. Everything under Stalin was bad, but everything now that we do is going to be good. It was national historical nihilism, throwing away and trashing one of their country's heroes who did all of these amazing things. And in Khrushchev's case, it was for selfish political purposes, for careerism, for climbing his way through the party and badmouthing his rivals within the party, his political rivals within the CCCP. When did they stop? This is a stupid question. People know that I know much more about China or Venezuela or Cuba or any of these countries than I actually know about the USSR. I'm getting better. My USSR knowledge is expanding, but I don't have as deep of a knowledge about it as I do with, you know, Cuba or China. When did they stop calling themselves the Bolsheviks and switch to the, Communist Party, CCCP? When did the name change happen? I'm curious about that. But anyways, the KPRF needs to embrace Stalin. And that doesn't mean you accept them wholesale. That doesn't mean we say that Abraham Lincoln is exactly perfect and he's what we should be like today. No, he was needed for his time period. Today, a lot of his views on race and stuff like that are way outdated. They're a product of the time. Before his time, he was the leading revolutionary against slavery, this outdated mode of production. Marxism is all about, transitions in and out of different modes of production, transitions into new eras of history, and he helped move America forward. So for his time, he was extremely progressive. He was one of the revolutionary agents of American society at that time. That doesn't mean we support everything he ever said about black people. It was the 1800s. It was the 1800s. Sorry, I was getting the Revolutionary War and Civil War mixed up. It's the 1800s. Obviously, he had some outdated positions about race. But anyways, national historical nihilism, very important to combat, and that's why it's very good to see the KPRF embracing Stalin again. Untold damage, and Chinese scholars have talked about this and researched this for years. Khrushchev did untold damage with the secret speech, introducing national historical nihilism into the party and into Russian society. Thank you for putting me on to Diego Rusarin. Let's go. Shout out Chino. Thank you for the $5, and shout out to Diego Rusarin. I'm glad I could put you on. Diego has way more subscribers than me, so he doesn't need it, but I'm glad that I could send him anybody. I'm glad you're watching him, Chino. Anybody here who speaks Spanish or is trying to learn Spanish like me, listen to Diego Rusarin. Escucha a Diego Rusarin. Es un comunista de México y Brasil y es muy based. Y Diego hacer muchos videos buenos videos. There you go. Sorry for all the Spanish speakers who I just heard. CCCP is Russian for USSR. CPSU. That's what it was. Yeah, okay, I see. Communist Party of Russia after seizing power, then called it the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in 1952. CPSU name came about. Okay. See, I'm humble, so I'm okay with you guys educating me about this. Some people want to pretend like they know everything, but I will never be that way. I don't know everything. There are some small, especially with the USSR, you guys always are. Every stream I learned something new. It's such a huge fucking thing, too. Envelop, you got the Eastern Bloc countries, you have the Soviet autonomous republics, and some of them I know more about than others. I could tell you quite a bit about Azerbaijan and Armenia and the Nagorno-Karabakh region, which is what the conflict is being fought over today. I could tell you a lot about how that was handled by the USSR and how it was much, much better. They made the disputed region into its own oblast, which is with its own sort of local government there, so that the Armenians and Azerbaijanis could live there in peace and not fight over it. And then as soon as the Soviet Union fell, they started shelling the shit out of each other. Azerbaijan especially. They're definitely more so in the wrong in that conflict. And the region that they're fighting over was majority Armenian. There was basically an ethnic cleansing in the 90s after the Soviet Union collapsed to push them out. So like little, certain autonomous Soviet republics, I could tell you way more about. I could tell you a lot about Ukraine because of everything going on with them. I could tell you a lot about Yugoslavia and all the countries there. Obviously, that's not part of the USSR, but still same era. Socialist country from the same era. But there's just so much to fucking learn, dude. There's so much to learn because it was such an expansive thing. It's not like learning about Venezuela, which the revolution happened in 98, and it's this tiny little country. You can learn everything you need in a little bit of time. Not everything. You can always learn more, but there aren't basic things about Venezuela's history that I don't understand. Like, what does CCCP mean? Or when did the party change from the Bolsheviks to the Communist Party of the Soviet Union? Not that those things are really important. But. Eddie, you are not that far from being today's Stalin. Oh, man. Thank you for saying that, brother. Thank you for saying that. And that's what I strive to be. I strive to be like my boy here, Che, who also strived to be like Stalin and Mao. Whether I live up to that or not, that's for you guys to decide. I'm very self-critical, so I'm always beating myself up for not doing more. But thank you very much for saying that. To hear that from one of my audience members, it fills me with pride. So that's what I strive for. I fall short every day, but I also get better every day in my efforts and work to improve, work to apply the dialectical materialist method to my own life to understand how I can live my life more effectively and productively for the class struggle. But thank you, brother. I appreciate that. One day I will be the real life Stalin. I just got to start robbing some banks to fund the ACP. Okay, that's a joke to my FBI agent who's watching this. We could really use it, though. We could use someone robbing some banks. It's not as easy today as it used to be. Maybe we'll invest in crypto or something. We'll actually become a crypto scam, like Hassan said. Did I see Marius up here somewhere? I thought I saw Marius Trotter. Maybe it was someone else. Okay, never mind. Be like Stalin and Mao, combat liberalism. Yes. If Eddie is Stalin, then who the hell is Haas? I would say, like, if we're going to LARP as historical figures, Haas is probably Stalin. I don't know, though. Haas is a little bit harsher than Stalin, maybe? I don't know. It's hard to say because Stalin was the man of steel. Yeah, we'll go with Haas as Stalin. I would be more of a Che, for sure. Not just because Che is my favorite, but realistically, that's the most similar to me. I just feel like in terms of personality and background and things like that. Carlos Fidel, because of the beards, mainly. Who the hell would Jackson be? Who was like really, really popular with the people besides Stalin in the USSR? Maybe Jackson would be Gorky, actually. Actually, now that I say that, given Gorky's social positions, his positions on social issues and on how they lead to fascism, Jackson might be Gorky, the celebrity, the famous guy who's got these like socially conservative opinions and believes that the fascists are like hardcore LGBTQ basically, which a lot of the Groypers are today. Jackson may be Gorky, low key. Jackson is Che? Yeah, that could be too. You could say different backgrounds though. Oh, I guess not really, because Che wasn't like from the gutter. He had a family with some money. Jackson doesn't come from like that much money. He's not like a rich kid or anything, but so yeah, you could compare Jackson to Che too. What do you think about Che's stance on the missile crisis? Based Basado? Oh, I meant to respond to that earlier. Someone said your Spanish is good. Gracias, amigo. Mi padre es un maestro de español y me enseña mucho. Y yo hace Duolingo para muchos días. Gracias. Based is basado in español, I guess. So basado. Che was like launched the nukes during the missile crisis, basically. He was ready to get after it at all times. He was very much about expanding the revolution beyond Cuba, to the point where he literally went to the Congo and Bolivia to wage revolutions on their behalf with their people. So he was much, much more aggressive in his foreign policy than Fidel was. Fidel was much more pragmatic. And, you know, I don't know. There are some of the areas where Che split with Fidel. Like, I always see where Fidel was coming from. Like, with the Cuban Missile Crisis, I don't know if Che's plan would have worked out that well. I think the U.S. might have nuked Cuba off the map if they went with Che's plan. But I don't know. Maybe it would have turned out better. And at the same time, like, Che really wanted a cultural revolution. He wanted a Chinese-style cultural revolution to promote socialist consciousness in Cuba. And in some ways they did, but it wasn't as hardcore as the Chinese cultural revolution. It wasn't as hardcore as Che wanted it to be. And I really think that would have been good. I know China doesn't support the Cultural Revolution today, but man, China would not be what it is today without the Cultural Revolution. Their people would not have been as steeled against capitalist, liberal, bourgeois brainwashing and ideology if they didn't have that. And I just think Cuba really could have benefited from the same thing, especially with a charismatic leader like Che Guevara leading it. So I fall on the side of Che on a lot of those splits. Carlos falls on the side of Fidel on a lot of those splits, and we debate them constantly. Sometimes I feel like he's just agreeing with Fidel and I'm just agreeing with Che because that's who we both like more than, than the other, just on like an aesthetic level, or just in general, in terms of like a character of history. I prefer Che and he prefers Fidel. But yeah, it's very interesting questions. It's not like they ever disagreed about anything stupid. They were always disagreeing about very, very important things. And Che didn't want to be a sugar colony of the USSR either. He really wanted Cuba to be self-sufficient. And Fidel did too. And it's not like Cuba could have just not sold all their sugar to the USSR. Although they did in the 90s. They did stop in the 90s. But that was after years of using that sugar sale, or those sugar sales, to develop their industry and stuff. So I don't know. All right, buddy. You're going in a timeout. Don't be a creep. Yeah, I should have just banned him outright. He doesn't deserve a timeout. He's being a creep to Jenny, our longtime viewer. Anybody who's mean to Jenny gets a straight perma ban. Get the fuck out. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. I'm late AF. I'm glad you're here, though. Thank you, Jenny. Appreciate you for being here and hopping in late. You can rewatch the stream later if you're interested. Come at me, bro. I need some more mods in here. I got to give some people mod. We only have Red Maze, who doesn't make every stream. Okay. Change the topic in chat. Don't talk about that. We don't need to open that bag of worms today. So that's on Jarzynski. Which one was he? I'm not gonna be able to tell you because I don't know much about him. I've heard of him. He is Polish guy, right? Oh, he led the Cheka. Okay. He established state security organs for the Bolshevik government. Actually, shout out to him, because that's basically the father of the Department of Personnel that we have in the ACP. And it's very, very important to have a socialist security apparatus. If we didn't have the Department of Personnel, our party would be deeply infiltrated at this point, and we would be heading the direction of PSL and CPUSA and all these other deeply controlled or influenced parties. PSL, I don't think it's that deeply controlled, but I think there's many factors in their liberalism and their refusal to embrace Marxism, Leninism, and federal infiltration has got to be one of them. But it's not the only reason, of course. It's also strategy and leadership and things like that. But anyways, we're the only communist party, allegedly communist party. We are the only communist party in America, but the only party that calls itself communist in America that has its own Cheka, its own Stasi, its own KGB. We have a Department of Personnel, which deals with security, make sure that there aren't rats in the party. When the Danny Shaw, John Molera stuff happened, it was the DOP that jumped to respond to it and to catch them on film, basically planning to wreck the party, planning to destroy all of the hard work that we've done and expose them to the world. That was the DOP. You need stuff like that because the CIA exists. The capitalists have their own, security mechanisms. So if you don't have your own socialist security mechanisms to do battle with the CIA and the FBI on the not literal battle, like fighting with guns, but mental battle, like chess, ideological and political chess. If you don't have them, then you're just at the whims of the CIA. You're at their mercy. How are you going to fight back against them if you don't have your own security apparatus? So Jarzynski was the one who was sort of the founder of that and the leader of that in the early USSR. And we think that's very important. We do. We think that, the Stasi and the KGB and the Cheka, when people say how evil the USSR was or East Germany was or whatever, that's always what they point to, the secret police. But if you look at what these secret police were actually doing, they were constantly finding infiltrators, foreign infiltrators. They were constantly fending off CIA regime change efforts, CIA coup efforts. They were doing extremely important things, not to overthrow the U.S., although there were some things where they were backing communists in the U.S., of course. But mainly they were just defending themselves. They were just preventing themselves from being crushed by the capitalist countries, using their intelligence apparatus to do what it's actually made for, which is defending the country, unlike the CIA and the FBI that actually serve as offensive apparatuses, or apparatuses to suppress the truth in our country. So it's very important for every socialist country and every socialist party to have a department of personnel or a Cheka or some kind of intelligence apparatus. And that's what we have at the ACP, led by a brilliant man, the American Jarzynski, I guess we'll say. And yeah, so I guess my opinion on Felix Jarzynski would be extremely positive, even though that's probably like sacrilegious to say in the U.S., where he gets blamed for all the crimes of the Soviet secret police. But socialist secret police who are fighting capitalist secret police are good. My most tanky opinion. That's another way that the American left has changed over the last 5 years. It's like, I used to say something like that, and then everyone would be like, tanky moment. Now everyone's just like, yeah, that makes sense. I agree. Tankies are right. It's like tanky isn't even a word anymore. But Eddie, it was authoritarian. You're damn right it was. It was the authority of the proletariat being asserted over the authority of the bourgeoisie, which is good, period. Eddie, tell us about the driveway incident. No! Should we just reveal that today randomly? We haven't even talked about the guy in months. Now we just bring up the Diddy driveway incident. This is what he looked like when it happened. That's all I'll say. Case closed. What up, Eddie? Love you, bro. Thank you, Lennon Dubois. Appreciate you, brother. Thanks for joining the stream. Dictatorship of the proletariat, absolutely. Yeah, no, we're not actually going to talk about that incident. No worries. ACP deep lore. It is. We have our own lore already 1 year into the party, and we have all this lore. It's awesome. I love it. So fun. That event was not fun. Our response to them trying to wreck the party was very fun. Read Animal Farm, kids, so you know what you are going into. Yes. Yes. Because I am a pig named Snowball. And I don't actually want your lives to be better. I don't want you to have democracy and real control of the political system and more time off at work. I don't want you to be able to retire earlier and have access to health care. And I don't want your kids to have access to education and all these things. I'm actually just a fat pig named Snowball who is manipulating you all so I can control you and send you to the glue factories. Okay? You are all hardworking horses who work hard on the farm all day and use your powerful horse legs to make money for me. Okay? This isn't capitalism. This is socialism, remember. You force all the horses, the hardworking horses, to make money for you, and then when they don't have any more energy to work when they get old, you send them to the glue factory to make glue. You know, that's not, you know, in socialist China, people are retiring at the age of 55, while in America, the retirement age is going up, and people are dying on the workplace floor because they can't afford to retire and Social Security is drying up. But Animal Farm is socialism, guys, not capitalism. It's socialism that'll make you work till you die and then send you off to the glue factory. Definitely not capitalism, where people are now retiring on cruise ships because they can't afford nursing homes. That's real, by the way. Old people can't afford nursing homes, so they're just like living on cruise ships because it's cheaper than affording a home where you're going to be taken care of by nurses and stuff. They just go drink till they die, I guess, on a cruise. Fucking crazy country that we live in. But yeah, all of Orwell's books, and Orwell was a socialist. He was a rat and, was serving the British intelligence the entire time. But I don't know if he was directly connected to them or not, but he was parroting their narratives in his work. But his books were probably about, Animal Farm is definitely about the Soviet Union, but like 1984, I think, is about capitalism. That was how Orwell saw capitalism working, which is stupid because that's not actually how capitalism works or how it brainwashes us. It's not one big brother coming on the TV screen to tell us what to do. It's entertainment media and consumerism that sort of brainwashes us subconsciously and implicitly. It's the movies and the television shows that we watch and the framing of the news media that leaves out very important facts in order to push a certain ideological line or a certain narrative. It's not just Big Brother coming on screen and telling you what to think. But anyways, Orwell wrote that book as a critique of capitalism and where he thought capitalism was going. And when it comes to Animal Farm, what he describes, it's much closer to a capitalist business than it is to any kind of socialist society where retirement was guaranteed, where they actually paid people pension funds. Even Venezuela, which has had its struggles with the U.S. Sanction regime, massively increased its pension funds that it was paying to retirees and lowered the average retirement age for their people. Every socialist country has lowered the retirement age for their people and given them the ability to one day not have to work full time. We're giving them the ability to take off work when they're old, and enjoy those last years of human life on this earth with family and, the way that your last years on earth should be enjoyed. Every socialist country has lowered the retirement age. Well, like I said, in the U.S., the retirement age is going the reverse. It's going up. We're working longer and longer and longer into our freaking 80s at this point, almost. And some people are working all the way into their 80s. So, yeah, every Orwell book is actually about capitalism. Eddie, speaking of Animal Farm, how do you view Napoleon, the pig? Oh, I thought the pig's name was Snowball for some reason. Is it Napoleon, or is there another pig named Snowball? But Napoleon and Snowball ring a bell. Oh, it's two pigs. Okay, it's Napoleon and Snowball. I was right. Napoleon, you got to read Marx's 18th Brumaire. That's an analysis of Napoleon's nephew taking power, but those were the conditions that were kind of created by Napoleon's rule. History repeats itself first as something, second as farce. I gotta know now. First as tragedy, second as farce. And he was referring to Napoleon's nephew basically being the farce. But he was a strong and powerful military leader. I don't know if there's anything true about him being mad that he was short and chubby, and that's why he had to conquer the whole world. But he was a very determined individual and a clever political operator. I don't think he was that progressive or revolutionary or anything. He was just an imperialist during the transition from feudalism to capitalism. He's an imperialist during the transition from one mode of production to the next. Not much other to say than that, I don't think. Snowball is the Trotsky one. Napoleon is Stalin, the corrupt one. That's right. Snowball's the good one. Because he says, no, this isn't real socialism. Real socialism is when we all live in heaven. They lie about, Anglo lies about Napoleon's height. That's true. It could be a lie. There's a lot of propaganda that we hear about leaders back in the day, even like the Spanish Empire, because they were competing with the British Empire. So they were all spreading all this propaganda about each other. There are people who will argue that the Spanish Empire was more humane than the British Empire and actually brought development and stuff more so than the British did. I don't know if that's true or not, but yeah, there are some people who go way too far with that, and they're like, bring back the Spanish Empire. Everything bad that's been said about it was British lies. Like, no, you're not getting the Caribbean. I'm sorry. But anyways, Thomas Paine. Napoleon sped up the end of feudalism, though. True. Hegel called Napoleon the world spirit on horseback. Okay. If Hegel said that, I gotta reevaluate Napoleon then. Clearly, you know more about it than me, Admiral Ross. You're right. That's kind of what I was getting at by he was this leader during the transition from feudalism to capitalism, and the feudal empires were kind of decaying because it was an outdated mode of production, and that's kind of Napoleon kind of sped along that decay and also was like a victim of it. So I agree with what you're saying. The defeat of Napoleon by the British was a major defeat for revolution. Yeah, okay. Napoleon was a revolutionary. You guys got me. I was wrong. He was more than just a feudal imperialist. Napoleon was historically progressive. I see that argument. I do. I think you guys are right. He came out of the Jacobins. I didn't know that. Yeah. He messed up by not supporting the Haitians. Yeah, like any imperialist, you know, he did horrible, horrible shit. But I get what you're saying about his historically progressive effect, given the context within Europe specifically. It's a really interesting question, actually. Haiti was brutal, you know, because Haiti had such a beautiful revolutionary movement that was also helping the anti-Spanish wars that Bolivar was raging in Latin America. They were actually aided by the Haitian Revolution. So they were just too white. They were like, we can't have black people having a revolution. They can't be like us. And the Haitians were like, watch us, bitch. And now they've been paying reparations to France ever since for ending slavery. Isn't that crazy? The Haitians, like, I think it was ended like a few years ago, but up until modern day, they were paying reparations to the French for having a revolution that outlawed slavery. The French are like, you owe us money for freeing slaves. And that's part of what kept Haiti in such a shitty economic position for so many years, because they had to pay these exorbitant amounts of money to the French, kind of like how Germany had to after the First World War. I heard that movie sucked. The Joaquin Phoenix Napoleon movie. I heard it was really bad and historically inaccurate. I saw a bunch of like autistic historians freaking out because it was so bad. Listen to the podcast Age of Napoleon. Napoleon regretted his position on Haiti. Now that's interesting. I did not know that. That is really interesting that he eventually regretted. I mean, that kind of shows right there. That kind of proves where his heart was at. That he was truly sort of a revolutionary force in the world. Joaquin. Yeah, I can't say that shit. All I know is that the movie Her, is a really realistic movie and really good movie that predicts kind of what AI will be like. I love the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix. Imperialism is kind of the worst shit ever. Yes. How do you feel about the Red Menace podcast? I think it's pretty good. I've never listened to them a ton. I think they're decent, though. They do history and debunk capitalist myths and stuff. They have good positions on most stuff. Joaquin Phoenix. Yeah, there you go. One of the Iowa reserves is Azerbaijani. That's cool. I have an Armenian friend, a good friend through wrestling, who's from Armenia, too. We'll have to get them in a room together so they can fight. Okay. Time for my big topic of the day.
Adelgard's opposition.
Putting this off. But who here, let me know in the chat if you've played the game Fire Emblem 3 Houses. Okay, it's a game that came out in like 2021, I think. Now, something about me, the Fire Emblem video game series is my favorite video game series of all time. I've played pretty much every single game. When I first picked up Fire Emblem, I was like, okay, this is the game for me. It's like somebody made a game specifically for me because it's a political story. The stories are always political dramas set usually under feudal society. And then it's like a turn-based strategy game, which is like my favorite kind of gameplay. But what I really liked was the stories. I liked how political they were and how usually the main character in these Fire Emblem games is somewhat of a revolutionary. I love Fire Emblem Three Houses. Good. You're going to love this next section then, Tim Ilsung. And that's not one that I've played. Most people are saying no, but so a sword bro in Super Smash. Yes, that's how most Americans, that's how I found out about Fire Emblem was through Super Smash Brothers. And then I played the game and I was like, wow, I like this even more than Smash. Smash is great though. I love playing that with my college buddies. Everyone's saying no. I recommend you play this game. It's on the Switch. If you're a communist, it's worth playing. It's worth playing any of the Fire Emblem games, but Three Houses is probably the most ambitious they've gotten with the story. Now, in Fire Emblem Three Houses, you can pick between three houses. Actually, there's four technically, but you get to pick King Dimitri of Fargus, which is basically like a religious theocracy that follows the Church of Seros. The church in this game is extremely powerful and has extreme political control, just like in any feudal system. So it's a feudal system where you have the theocratic kingdom of Fargus. You have the Leicester Alliance, which is like sort of a liberal alliance of like merchants and stuff. And then you have the Empire, which is led by this girl in the red, Adelgard. And what many people have said, if you go on Reddit, the well of knowledge that is Reddit, you will see a lot of people saying that Adelgard's path is fascist. It's called the Black Eagle House. If you join the Black Eagle House, they say that you become a fascist imperialist, and that this game, gives you a good example of what fascism is like and what fascists believe. That is the dumbest shit I've ever heard. Not the dumbest shit I've ever heard. I get where those people are coming from, but no, that is incorrect. Adelgard is a communist. And the fact that people call her a fascist, she's a communist living under feudalism. The fact that people call her a fascist just goes to show that they have no idea what communism is. They think communism is the stateless, classless society where everybody is completely equal regardless of their merits and regardless of their skill. And we just give everybody equal amounts of stuff no matter what. Everybody thinks that's what communism is, so they don't realize that Adelgard is a communist. But she absolutely is. She wants to unite the entire continent. So she wants to get rid of the theocratic kingdom of Fargus and the Leicester Alliance and unite the continent, which is called Fodlan, into one united civilization free from class-based oppression. So basically doing what Pan-Africanists want to do with Africa, or what Pan-Arab socialists wanted to do with the Middle East, or what Mao Zedong did with China. Uniting, or the USSR, right, with the Bolsheviks, but uniting all of these different nationalities and different ethnic groups and different religious groups into one state, into one civilization, into one society, the People's Republic of China, which includes Uyghur Muslims and includes Han Chinese people. We're all part of the PRC and we're all patriotic for it. He was able to unite all these different groups of people under one banner. That is what Adelgard is trying to do in this game. She's trying to unite the people of Fodlan under one banner. The other thing she wants to do is abolish the nobility. She wants to abolish the system of nobility, which is the class system in this game. She wants to abolish the power of the Church of Seros, the dominant religious institution in this game. And she wants to create a meritocracy where people who are born as peasants can rise up and become leaders of the country. She wants to invest in development. She wants to invest in new research institutions and bring peace to the continent and invest the continent's resources in things that are productive for the people and give political power to the people rather than the nobility and the religious elite. So she is fighting against the nobles, the dominant economic class in her society, and the church, the other part of the dominant economic class in her society. And she's trying to unite the country the same way that communist leaders of the past have done. How is that fascism? Just because it's an empire, just because she runs the Adrestrian Empire and it's called an empire, and just because her house is called the Black Eagle's house and it sounds kind of like fascist coded or whatever, doesn't mean that she's a fascist. Her goals are explicitly communist, right? Creating a meritocracy is communism. Capitalism doesn't reward you for working hard and being successful and being skilled at your job. Capitalism rewards you for brown-nosing your boss, for doing schemes on the stock market, for trapping people in debt, for charging people rent. Capitalism rewards you for the most parasitic, antisocial, counterproductive to the whole of society activities possible. That's what capitalism rewards. Communism, if you're really good at your job, right, you should climb the ladder. That's not how it works under capitalism. Communism is a meritocracy. It's not just everybody getting the same amount of stuff, period. And even in socialist countries like the USSR, a doctor got paid more than a janitor. The janitors still had the right to live and got vacation time and got pensions and had protections in the workplace. It was still better than being a capitalist janitor, but you didn't get as much money as a doctor who went to school for years and is doing, a job that's more important to the functioning of society. That being said, it wasn't millions of times more. It was, a much smaller amount more than what the janitors made, but they had some sort of hierarchy that was based on merit. How much are you giving to the society? That's what Adelgard's trying to create, not a rigid class-based society. She's not handing everything over to the banks and private entities who supported her rise to power on day one like Hitler. That's not her goal. And in the lines of dialogue in this game where she explains her goal for Fodlan, for the continent, it is explicitly communist and not explicitly, but implicitly communist and meritocratic, which is what communism is, not just everybody's equal. And that's where the misconception about this comes from, mainly. It's from the fact that she's fighting because people think that communists can never fight in a war, because they don't know what the Russian Civil War was and what the Chinese Civil War was and the Cuban Revolution was. So they don't realize that communists actually do have to fight sometimes in order to unite their country and fight against the forces of reaction. So people think because she's fighting and she's part of an empire that she's automatically fascist. And then they think because she doesn't want to just make everyone equal and she wants to make a meritocracy instead, that she can't be a communist and she has to be a fascist. No, communism is meritocracy. And she says, instead of having a system of nobility, we'll have a system where people can prove their worth, and the people who work the hardest and do the best in school and pay the most attention to their studies and give the most back to society will be elevated to positions of power, rather than being elevated to positions of power based on what family that you were born into. So she's destroying the antiquated class system and replacing it with a meritocratic, more egalitarian system, which she says explicitly in the game, and the narrator of the game says this, that they're fighting to end the antiquated class system and also liberate humanity because they're controlled by this big demon dragon called the Immaculate One. That's the head of the church. So here's a little background on Adelgard's story and why she wants to do what she wants to do.
Addition to the church stems from her personal experience and her beliefs about how Fodlan should change. As a child, she was subjected to crest experimentation by those who slither in the dark, which the imperial nobility allowed. In Fodlan,
so the imperial nobility allowed her to be experimented on by the church, who do these things with crests, which are things that people are born with, which Adelgard also wants to abolish in the game. Similar to the CIA's MKUltra experiments and all the fucked up shit they've done to our population. I mean, I'm a victim of a U.S. biowarfare program. I dealt with Lyme disease my entire upbringing, and it basically ruined my childhood. Nowadays, if you research Lyme disease, you'll realize that it was a U.S. bioweapon made to fight the Soviet Union during the Cold War. So they have tested stuff on our population. They've experimented on our population. They've purposefully dosed our population with shit to make us weaker and make us numb, and make us unable to fight back. That's the kind of thing they've pushed on the working class. And that's the same thing that's going on in this game. The church is doing these weird experiments on the people that ruins their lives, and that's what they're fighting against. How is that fascism? The fascists are the church. The fascists are the ones doing weird experiments on the people, just like the Nazis did. It's the reverse. The church are the fascists. The people fighting the fascists can't be also the fascists. That's the communists. The people who fight the fascists are the communists. And yes, that comes with violence sometimes. And this game is very sad because you go to school with the people from the other houses and then you have to fight them and kill them. But that's reality. That's how the gears of history move forward. Sometimes it's violent and sad. And that's a theme throughout all of the Fire Emblem games.
Crests are seen as sacred and determine social status, nobility, and political power. The Church of Saros reinforces this system, and the nobility exploit it to maintain their dominance.
People think commies hate religion. That's another thing that Adelgard says in this game. She says, I'm not against the faith, I'm against the church. So she explicitly says, I'm not anti-religion, I'm against this institution that controls all of the land and the lives of the working people and experiments on them and ruins their lives with these weird MK Ultra experiments.
Adelgard sees it as a structure that harms everyone, victimizing people like herself through unethical experimentation, while also encouraging others to abuse the system by using children as political tools, valued only for their crests. Even so, she doesn't...
Bruh, is this real? They forced me to get the vax and now I'm buying. I hope that's a joke. Prayers for you, Tim Il-sung. They forced me to get it too. I got so sick from it. Way sicker from the vax than I ever got from COVID.
Hate the people who put their faith in the goddess. She shows concern for individuals like Manuela, who might be affected by the conflict should Adelgard win.
F the Church of Saros, damn right.
Her problem is with the institution itself, not the followers. Adelgard wants a society where people are judged by their actions, not their bloodline. Since she doesn't believe that Rhea or the church will ever allow that kind of reform, she sees dismantling it as necessary. Adelgard's opposition to the church stems from her personal...
Do you hear that part at the end, what she's fighting for?
By their actions, not their bloodline. The problem is with the institution itself, not the followers. Adelgard wants a society where people are judged by their actions, not their bloodline. Since she doesn't believe that Rhea or the church will ever allow that kind of reform, she sees dismantling it as necessary.
She's a communist revolutionary. She wants to get rid of the antiquated class system, but she realizes that she can't do that through reform. They're working within the system. So she needs to take on the Church of Saros head on and use force. She is a communist revolutionary. You guys hear that? People are calling her character fascist. They're saying that this is fascism, to fight against the antiquated class system in the church. That is not fascism. That is communism. I feel like I'm going crazy every time I see people call my girl Adelgard a fash. She's a communist-based queen. Literally a queen, not a queen, but an empress. Okay. Now, here's a video discussing the morality of Adelgard. I haven't watched this video, but we'll live react to it here. It's only 6 minutes, but I don't know if I'll watch the whole thing. If there's nothing interesting brought up, we'll just skip away. But I think this might give us a good idea to debunk, or a good way to debunk some of the Adelgard is fascist arguments. We'll see.
Maybe I'm reaching here, but when I look at the before and after pictures of
the red dress says everything. Exactly. Exactly. Even the fact that she's in red, clearly. But people just conflate communism with fascism. They see communism in practice, and they've been taught to think that's fascism. That's what BreadTube and ContraPoints and all them pushed for years. Anytime you see someone talking about patriotism or the working class, you know, they're actually talking about whites and racial warfare. So anytime you see communism, just call it fascism. That was the whole BreadTube ideology. And it affects gamers to this day, which is why I have to cook them about their incorrect gaming politics.
In not only image, but in the personality depicted in that image. I've already discussed my opinions on Dimitri in a previous video, so in this one, we're going to talk about the main lady herself, Adelgard. Now, before I begin, I know I already announced this in the community tab, but for those of you who didn't see it, I will be doing a Let's Play of Fire Emblem Three Houses for the Black Eagles route on Hard Classic based on recent votes. There's going to be daily uploads as well as an unboxing of the special.
Should I do that? Should I bring back the Eddie Liger gaming channel? When I was playing through this route, when I was playing through Adelgard's Black Eagles route, I was like, it's time to bring back the gaming channel. It's really time. I have a capture card. There's no reason for me not to do it. I could easily record the whole game and do a Let's Play, and we could talk about the politics of the game the whole time. We'll see. We'll see. I'm extremely, extremely busy, which is why I put the gaming channel on hiatus in the first place. But maybe we'll make a comeback here if I get some more time.
Special edition on Friday, so if that's something that interests you, stick around and get ready for a wild ride. I look forward to discussing the game with all of you in the comments. Now, without further ado, let's get back to Adelgard. Prior to the time skip, all of our lords seem like they're just innocent high school kids who have large expectations.
Spoiler alert, by the way. I'm sure they're going to spoil part of the game. You just mentioned the time skip already, which, again, spoiler alert, turn it off if you really, really want to play this game and don't want anything to be spoiled. I'll try not to spoil too much of it because I do want you all to play this game. But actually don't click away. Just put it on mute and watch me anyway so I don't lose viewers. But anyways, yeah, spoiler alert, there's a time skip. You play the first half of the game, then it skips 5 years, and then you play the second half of the game. It's very, very good, clever gameplay mechanic and storytelling mechanic.
Ahead of them. They are all thrust into leadership positions, which seems to suit them for the most part, and they all have their own unique personalities. Dimitri looks like the embodiment of honor and professionalism, while Claude being the happy-go-lucky power of friendship kind of guy. They all have some sort of darkness in their descriptions, but for the most part, that's not something we see immediately. Edelgard is different. There's no darkness, there's no weakness, there's no uncertainty. Nobility, confidence, power. All we get from her description is a girl.
She's pragmatic as hell, and she has this advisor named Hubert, who is like harsh and ultra pragmatic and materialistic. Like, not materialistic as in he's like obsessed with consumer goods. Like, he's only focused on what he needs to do and accomplishing his goals. He's not an idealist. And he reminds me of Kyle Pettis, actually. The character does. I got some super chats. Do you think Mexican cartels are compromised? I'll talk about that later. Thank you, Yemen. Thank you, Stealthy47. Appreciate you. After this segment, I'll answer your super chats. Thank you guys very much. Keep them coming.
Who seems to just fit the role that she must take. She also wields an axe, which to me could be rather symbolic as one fated to uphold the heaviest of fates. She must wield what is classically the heaviest of weapons, only wielded by the burliest of Fire Emblem characters. But maybe this is just me saying dumb stuff, as I sometimes tend to. But when we see characters like this in Fire Emblem, they either go one of two routes. We either have the strong and steadfast lord who will do nothing to accomplish their ideals, or we have a villain whose unwavering mentality leads to the straightest of paths down a dark road that cannot be reversed. At least, not easily, and not without cost. Alongside her description, we also have her art, both courtesy of official game art and some new art from Fire Emblem Heroes. The Edelgard of Young seems to be brimming with innocence and youth, and we even have many scenes of her looking to be a happy and cheerful young woman. But somewhere along the way, things must have changed. And here we have to look at the contrast of her pre-time skip art and her post-time skip art. The main detail.
This is something that they do with the characters too. They have them change physically after the time skip as they're all becoming the leaders of their own specific piece of land, their own societies. Such a good gameplay mechanic to come back 5 years later and meet up with the same people. It's brilliant.
The detail that stands out to me the most here is her mouth, and more specifically, her smile, or lack thereof. The first picture has her cracking a bit of a smile, with it clearly having, at the very least, a slight upstroke in the drawing, whereas in the post-time skip art, it seems to have inverted, with the slightest of downstrokes. And I don't think I've seen a single scene of her in the trailers where she has shown a happy face post-time skip, so to speak. We also see a change in attire to the attire of what we can only assume to be the Empress. The color red has always been a defining factor of Edelgard's wardrobe, but here it is much more emphasized, where she has also gotten rid of the black and replaced it with gold in various places. Gold and red are classically the colors of royalty, and this shows that she has completely ascended to that role, in addition to the headdress of sorts. Speaking of which, let's talk about that. While Dimitri has his eye patch and Claude has his facial hair, Edelgard has received a headdress with a golden emblem of sorts in the middle, as well as 2 horns on it. Now, I don't know about you, but the most symbolic character I can think of with 2 horns doesn't exactly have the best reputation out there. Anyways, let's move on. In terms of her personality,
She's not the devil. That's definitely not what the game makers were going for. They were not trying to turn her into a devil. They were maybe trying to make her look like a bull that's strong-willed, and she's constantly saying, I will not let you get in my way, or I will not tolerate obstacles, is one of the things that she says over and over again. She's like a bull smashing through any obstacles in her way, just like Mao Zedong was. But they weren't trying to make her look like the devil. There's another character who she fights who looks like the devil.
Very little that we know, but the major detail is the following quote from the E3 trailer, where she says, "Still, we have no choice but to eliminate those who cling to unreasonable ideas of justice." This sounds
Based doesn't mean eliminate as in kill, but liberal idealist ideas of justice as in fighting for the corrupt church that experiments on children, right? These are corrupted, unreasonable ideas of justice. They're idealism. And the Black Eagles are the materialists who actually understand what needs to be done in order to transform their society for the better. They understand you can't make an omelet without cracking a few eggs. She has high muscle fibril density, so she can wield the heaviest weapon only used by the bully's characters. Must be. She also has followed the ACP fitness program. More evidence she's a communist.
like someone with a very particular definition of justice, and someone who would stop at nothing to implement what they want. One last thing I want to discuss is the title of Emperor. In the Fire Emblem series...
Yeah, in the other character, like I played as Claude on my first playthrough, the Golden Deer House, and I like Claude. He's a good character, and it was a fun playthrough, but he's kind of a lib. His whole thing is like promoting more immigration and having this, not actually bucking the system, but just kind of working within it to try and do your best. Like, it's this liberal idealist idea of justice. And I like Claude, but again, he's kind of a lib. For those who have played the game, you probably know what I mean.
We have seen emperors or empresses associated with nothing but villainy. Allow me to explain. The notable holders of the title of emperor or empress are as follows: Hardin, Rudolph.
This is exactly what I was just saying. Remember when I said that the fact that she's a part of an empire, people say that she's automatically fascist, even though she's uniting her continent and getting rid of this liberal bourgeois society run by merchants. Not getting rid of the society, but incorporating that society into the empire, or uniting the entire continent of Fodlan. And she's getting rid of the religious theocracy that protects the church that's all messed up and promotes the class system and does experiments on children. So she's not going out, overseas and conquering new lands. She's uniting the empire, which used to be united in the past and then was broken up by separatism and by the meddling of the church. Again, the church really replicates the CIA in this story, or the church in feudal times when it actually had power and owned land.
Arvis, Vigard, Sanaki, and Walhart. All of these are characters who are, in one way, shape, or form, associated with the antagonistic side of the plot in their respective games. You can already see where I'm going with this, but if Adelgard is to be the 7th in line for notable Fire Emblem emperors and empresses, it's not really looking that good for her. You can make a case that most of these may have had good intentions, or were more of an indirect association, but maybe that'll be the subject of another video. Or you can go watch Arvis Did Nothing.
Again, it's the most surface level shit that they use to call her a fascist or a bad guy. These gamers, these Reddit gamers, never address the substance of what she actually fights for in the game. All they do is say, well, she has devil horns and she's the empress, so she's bad. What about the actual dragon that runs the church that she's fighting, that has enslaved all of humanity and manipulated history in order to push this pro-church narrative?
Wrong. It serves the same purpose. But I digress. To conclude, I'm not really sure what to make of Adelgard, but given the room for moral ambiguity in this character, as well as the fact that we might be able to play as a villain in her route, this is why I've decided to go with the Black Eagles in my first playthrough. I also like...
Of course she's morally ambiguous. She's morally ambiguous in that if you support getting rid of the antiquated class system and implementing a meritocracy, then you think she's morally good, that the people she kills are worth it to do this. The revolution she wages is worth it. If you're on the side of the church and the nobility and the rich and the existing state of things and the existing ruling class and the class system, then you think what she's doing is wrong. And you say, oh, she's violent. How could you do all this violence? So, yeah, any revolutionary is going to be technically morally ambiguous. It depends on what side of the class struggle you're on.
My axe lords. So, yeah.
And that's what's so beautiful about this game. Every game is like, every Fire Emblem game has the point that the wheels of history are always turning, And sometimes it's when there's a war or a violent clash that history changes, either for better or for worse. Usually for better, right? It talks about that, and then it talks about the moral angle of what it's like, like what it would have been like to be a Soviet soldier fighting against Nazi Germany. Like, you still have to kill people, and you still have to see war and do these horrible things that are, hard on the human psyche. But ultimately, what you're fighting for in the long run is justified, and what you're fighting for in the long run is good. You have to fight these people and risk your own life in order to see justice win out in the real world. That's a theme throughout all of the Fire Emblem games, that history is driven through struggles. I swear these games were written by Marxists, guys.
Yeah, there's that too. Anyways, that's my pre-game analysis on Adelgard, so feel free to let me know what you think in the comments below, and whether or not you agree with me.
Oh, that's his pre-game analysis? Well, what the hell? Why would you do that? Why would you do a pre-game analysis of if she's good or bad? Unless he also did a follow-up. I don't think he did, though. What? How can you do an analysis on if she's good or bad without actually playing the game? Now we know why he was only focused on surface level shit. Man, these gamers, they don't know how to be political researchers, I tell you what. It's almost like they're gamers and not political researchers. Funny seeing a communist talking about a game and console made by Japanese supercapitalism. Yeah, true. Hey, you still got good people working within the Japanese supercapitalist system. Maybe the Fire Emblem developers at Intelligent Systems will be the ones to lead the Japanese revolution. Interesting that their company's called Intelligent Systems, because I think they are very intelligent with how they produce. Although their most recent game I am not a fan of, Fire Emblem Engage. The combat is fun, but they got rid of it's like a story for kids. They went from this deep political drama to like a story for kids, like that would be on an iPhone game or something. And I'm just like rolling my eyes every time I play it. I don't know if I'm even going to finish it. I'll just go back and play Three Houses again. Japanese capitalism is better than Western capitalism. I'd agree. They got better manufacturing methods too. All right, one more video to react to today, guys. No more video game talk. I'll probably upload that as a clip to try and get all the gamers to watch my video. I'll say, is Adelgard morally good, communist, or fascist? I think that'll be the title. So for those of you who aren't into video games or who have never played Fire Emblem, thank you for bearing with me through that. I hope you do play the game if you're a gamer, because it's very good. But hopefully everybody in the audience has seen the movie Robocop. Let me know in the chat if you've seen Robocop or not. Classic movie from the 80s. Cheesy, like campy, typical 80s action movie. But Robocop is actually one of the most politically intelligent movies I've ever seen. It was a movie that was created by Paul Verhoeven, the same creator of Starship Troopers, which is another cheesy, campy action movie that's politically deep. And this was a guy who lived through Nazi occupation in the Netherlands, I believe. And living through Nazi occupation and getting to see that influenced him all throughout his career and in the films that he made. He's constantly mocking fascism, or at least putting up a mirror to fascism. And at the same time, he's almost like having fun with it, right? Like there's all this over-the-top violence and absurd violence, and it's like enjoyable. It's like an 80s, cheesy, over-the-top action movie. But underneath each of his movies are these deep political themes and this satire of capitalist fascist society. And the same goes for Starship Troopers. But I think I might like Robocop even better, possibly because I watched Robocop when I was very young, and I went back and watched it later and was like, oh, wow, this is a smart film. I did not expect Robocop to be a smart film. But here's a TikTok I did on it where I explain my views on Robocop. Would you believe me if I told you that Robocop is one of the most politically intelligent movies of all time? Or that it was directed by one of the most politically interesting filmmakers of all time? Because both those things are true, and I'll explain why. Robocop was made in the 80s when Ronald Reagan was trying to privatize everything, meaning he was handing over government institutions to corporations and other private entities. And Robocop satirizes this by showing what it would be like if the police were privatized somewhere in the future. Early on in the movie, the police force is completely taken over by a giant corporate conglomerate called Omni Consumer Products, which is a... I love that. When I went back and watched the movie as an adult, I'm like, Omni Consumer Products is the perfect name for a giant corporation. Just so bland. Literally means nothing. But it's made to sound futuristic and cool. Omni Consumer Products. And what does it mean? All consumer products. We control all the consumer products. And this film criticizes monopolies and privatization and how, capital concentrates itself at the top and a few corporations control everything. And what a perfect name for a corporation that controls everything. Omni Consumer Products. And this was, the other thing I was going to say, this was made in the 80s. So it was 1987 it was released. Right during the era of Ronald Reagan and all the neoliberal privatization that was going on. So it was making a mockery of the Reagan administration, which is a hilarious name that's a parody of mega corporations in and of itself. And these guys, among other things, are a defense company that sells weapons like Raytheon and Boeing in real life. And once they take over the police, they can use taxpayer money to buy their own products, which in this movie are mainly high-tech attack robots. And this is very similar to how the military-industrial complex works in real life, selling their products to the government and then lobbying the government to make sure that they continue buying those products. And these military-grade weapons are often also sold to police forces, which is part of the reason why our police are so hyper-militarized, which again is something that's being satirized in Robocop. The movie also looks at the... Robocop, Omni Consumer Products is making the robots, and their whole plan is that we'll implement these robot cops into the police, and then once they've shown their effectiveness in killing people, we'll sell them to the military. They open the Omni Consumer Product OCP executives openly say that. So it's literally works the same way that the military-industrial complex works. Sell military equipment to the police, have the police test them, and then give them to the IDF or whoever else. It works the other way around too. If the IDF has some weapon that works really well, they'll give it to the police, especially if the IDF or the U.S. military doesn't need it anymore. They can just hand over their old guns to the police. Now we have these, if you look at a lot of European countries, the police are driving around in these little buggy cars with a baton and these silly hats on their head, whereas the American police look like special forces. They're all decked out in SWAT gear with machine guns and grenades and shit. So our police are hyper-militarized, and that's a reason why, is the military-industrial complex profits from selling weapons to them. The Israeli weapons contractors profit from training and selling weapons to the police. American. The movie also looks at the decay of American society, as it's set in a futuristic, almost post-apocalyptic version of Detroit, which the corporation wants to transform into a city for the rich called Delta City, which reminds me a lot of Cop City in Atlanta, or Elon's Starbase City that he wanted to build in Texas. The movie also parodies the media, which takes the chaos and violence that people are seeing all around them, repackages it, and then sells it back to them as a commodity. That, and they're always... I saw someone bring up Judge Dredd. Yeah, that's another movie that comes to mind when I talk about Robocop. The remake was so good. Lots of deep themes in that, too. Trying to sell you something.
I'd buy that for $1.
The movie also has a human element, as at the beginning, Robocop is a family man who does his job the best that he can. But as the movie goes on, he literally becomes a machine for the system and for their methods of profit extraction. So if you thought Robocop was just a cheesy 80s action movie, well, it is, but it's also really intelligent, and you should watch it again. The film's director, Paul Verhoeven, grew up under German occupation in World War II, and that experience influenced all of his films. And our country is looking more and more like one of his movies every single day. So yeah, there's the politics of Robocop. More interesting than you probably remembered. Definitely, if you watch it now, you'll see immediately that it's a parody of monopoly capitalist society, capitalism in its stage of imperialism, monopolies, and financialization that Lenin talks about, a critique of fascism. It's a critique of all these things, and omni-consumer products, they buy off the police. They're in bed with the crime, the people committing the crimes, the people purveying violence, and their whole goal throughout the movie is to put profit first. And they do all of these things that are negative for the society, for Detroit, which is where the movie's set, in order to maximize their own profits. And those are the people running our society in real life. Like, we really do live in Idiocracy or in Robocop or in one of these fictional movies about how bad a society can get and how dumb and backwards a society can get. That's where we're at now. It's like the collapse of Rome, damn it. Hilarious Omni Corporation, I agree. America makes 1930s Germany look like a WNBA. On God, though. For real. Like, in a lot of ways, we're low-key worse or high-key worse. Have you ever read Snow Crash or Neil Stevenson about a horrific ANCAP America? No, I've never read that. My favorite dystopian novel is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. If you read Brave New World, it is so much more accurate to what society's like today than Orwell's 1984. It's not even close. In Brave New World, there's this pill that makes people feel good and pacifies them and makes them numb called Soma, which are literally opioids that Aldous Huxley literally predicted opioids and the opioid crisis and the fact that they would dose us with all this stuff. Even weed, I'm not the most anti-weed guy, but, there's a dispensary on every corner now, and even that is something that pacifies us and makes us okay with the current state of things. I'm not against you if you smoke a little weed at night to go to sleep, but understand the broader, societal implications of, putting a cloud of weed smoke over the whole population. You numb people and make them less likely to fight back. You make them more paranoid and question their ideals, and question themselves and their own self-confidence. So there's a little bit of paranoia, and self-critique can be good, but you don't want to overdo it. We don't need to be high when we're organizing is basically what I'm saying. But what was I saying? Brave New World. Yeah. So they have Soma, which is basically opioids that they dose the population with. And then in Brave New World, they're hypersexualizing children. They're allowing children to engage in like this sexual play, which is so reminiscent of what we're seeing today with the hypersexualization of our society. Because sex sells, it's everywhere. We have all these porn websites making billions of dollars, poisoning people's brains with pornography. We have, liberals and NGOs pushing for like hypersexualized school curriculums that focus on gender and sexuality more so than learning science or learning math. And focuses on pronouns with 5-year-olds more than, studying the hard sciences or tech ed or something productive. I'm sorry, I know I might sound like a conservative right now, but that's what the liberal NGOs and the liberal establishment is pushing. Like the hypersexualization of our kids and this hyper focus on sexual politics. They always want to talk about it, even with us. We're like, we don't really care about that stuff. We're focused on class struggle. And they're like, no! Focus on identity politics and sexual politics. Ask people if they're non-binary instead of talking to them about their workplace and their wages and their lack of health care. This is where the liberal establishment is at, hypersexualizing our society in all sorts of ways, just like Brave New World. And then, of course, Brave New World, there's the harsh class divide between the rich and the poor, which obviously not that hard to predict that. But that movie is so much more accurate, and the Brave New World society looks so much more like America today than the 1984 society did in that book, for sure. Huxley was 100% right. Yes. He also had his wife inject him with LSD when he died. Fun fact. He was big into tripping, and when he died, his wife like injected him with a needle with all this LSD. So he must have just been one with the universe when he passed away and became the universe. That'd be an interesting way to go. That would be an interesting way to go, because psychedelics can kind of help you find peace with death. If you use them safely and not, as like a street drug or a party drug, they can kind of give you this like peace with the universe and with dying, and you can kind of detach from your ego, which wants to keep you alive and has that survival instinct. Like, it's okay when I die, I'll just become one with the universe, and I'm just part of this whole system. I'm part of the ecosystem. I'm not an individual. I'm part of the whole. It's kind of the feeling that psychedelics give you. So being injected with a heroic dose of LSD when you die would be crazy. You'd be like, let me fade into the earth. What did I even walk into? Sorry, Bear. You walked into us talking about Aldous Huxley, whose wife injected him with LSD when he died. That's what I was talking about. I love psychs. Yeah, there's some revolutionary potential there. I'm not saying the ACP should start handing out LSD, but it can definitely make you think more collectively rather than more individualistically. I know a lot of good communists who LSD or mushrooms kind of knock something loose in their brain, where they were able to start questioning everything that they've been taught for their whole life, and see the collective rather than see through their own ego to view themselves as part of the collective whole. And I'm not saying go out and take LSD or, we need to start promoting drugs. I'm just saying with psychedelics, I'm very much in favor of more research into psychedelics. We need to figure out if they can be used as a therapeutic tool. Spoiler alert, they can. We need to decriminalize them and have a more realistic view of them. How can we use them? How can we prevent them from being used the wrong way? How can we learn more about them is the main thing. Because when the government makes these substances illegal, it makes it very hard for researchers to actually find out more about them. And with substances like heroin and meth, it's like, yeah, we kind of know what they do. They make your brain feel really good, either really up and hyped, or, you fall into this euphoric heroin haze, and it destroys your body and it destroys your mind. We know that. We don't know as much about psychedelics, and there is much more evidence that psychedelics can be positive when used to treat PTSD, used for therapy, used for getting people over traumatic events, used for conquering addiction, right? Ibogaine, this psychedelic, is like 70% effective in getting people to quit smoking, which is just insane that you could take a plant and be done smoking. And it's rough. You go through like a 20-hour bad trip where your mind basically just shows you over and over again that you're killing yourself by smoking. So by the time you come out of it, you'd never want to touch a cigarette again. It's painful, but still, if it can save people's lives, that's something that needs to be looked into. So the socialist position on drugs isn't as simple as just ban everything, right? There's research to be done, and there needs to be a recategorization of these drugs, the ones that have therapeutic benefits and the ones that don't. And the same with pharmaceutical drugs. There needs to be we need to reanalyze pharmaceuticals and find out which ones are actually helping and which ones aren't. Again, spoiler alert, most of them aren't doing shit other than covering up people's symptoms. I do these ceremonies based. I'm sorry if you don't agree with that, but I do based. Dude, there's so much therapeutic potential with psychedelics. There's so much untapped potential there. I'm telling you guys. I understand if you're like hardcore anti-drug. I get it, but you don't have to be. You can still be hardcore anti-drug and promote sobriety and stuff, and still want psychedelics to be researched. There's nothing that can be hurt by us knowing more, by us researching, by us applying the dialectical materialist method to analyze society and analyze the different substances that grow from the earth or the different compounds that we can manufacture and knowing more about them. And maybe we find out there is no therapeutic benefit to psychedelics and we just need to ban them outright. But the evidence does not point in that direction. Research would be good. Yeah. You have a little propaganda going on in your head there, Eddie, but not too bad. What's the propaganda, John? I'm curious. Why are we talking about Sykes in a stream about Stalin? Because the stream has been going for 2.5 hours, and there's only so much Stalin you can talk about. And we were talking about Aldous Huxley, the writer of Brave New World, who had his wife inject him with LSD when he died. That's why. Marx was very into anthropology. Yeah, everyone should read Origins of the Family, Private Property, and the State, where Marx cites heavily from Lewis Henry Morgan, the main leading anthropologist at the time, the most groundbreaking anthropologist at the time. They were huge into anthropology. And a lot of the predictions that Engels made in Origins, where he drew heavily from Marx's anthropological research to write Origins. A lot of the predictions he made were proven by later anthropological research. So he was way ahead of his time. Pretty sure they were doing that good research decades ago. It was just covered up. I mean, they were researching it, but they were weaponizing it for like political purposes. Like LSD was used in Project MK Ultra. So they were researching it as a tool to brainwash people. So I would say the research that they were doing years ago was not the right kind of research. They weren't using it for therapeutic benefits and to improve regular people's lives. They were using it to destroy people's brains so that they were scrambled and trying to implant them. Find ways to implant them with the CIA's ideas so they could basically control people like drones. That's what that MK Ultra project was. So I would say the research that they did was not the right kind of research. Just the negativity about Sykes, that's all. I don't have any negativity about it. I have negativity about heroin and things like that, and meth and street drugs. But I'm just saying, the communist position is not to be pro-drug. So I'm just saying, I get that people are have an aversion to drugs and promote sobriety. And I'm trying to open people's minds, which is kind of a pun when we're talking about psychedelics. I'm trying to tell people like these psychedelic drugs might be something different that we need to research. If I could talk more about my own personal opinions on it. Obviously, I think you can tell, I do think there's real therapeutic potential there. But I know some people have mixed opinions on it. So I'm just being middle of the road there. And I haven't done anything like that in years and years myself. I'm just too focused on what I do with the Communist Party now. I don't feel like I need drugs to think collectively. I have the dialectical materialist method. Okay, we'll hit these super chats here quick. Yeemem, thank you for the $5 and for being a YouTube member. Do you think Mexican cartels are compromised? Setting the stage, seeing the state ignore them and fixate on Venezuela is interesting. Is Mexico controlled? No, Mexico is cracking down on the cartels. The party in Mexico, the Morena party, basically has the same program as a communist party. They won through elections. They didn't have a revolution. But everything they're trying to implement economically is good. And they are fighting against the cartels. Claudia Sheinbaum, their president. But do I think the Mexican cartels themselves are compromised? Yes. I mean, this is common knowledge in Latin and Central America that the biggest dealers of drugs in those regions are the U.S., the DEA. The more U.S. military personnel that have gone to Colombia, the more that drug trafficking out of Colombia has increased, right? So the U.S. sends these people to supposedly fight drug smuggling, and it goes up because they're engaging in it, facilitating it. That's how that's why Gary Webb, that journalist, was killed for exposing that the U.S. was taking crack cocaine from the Contras, these right-wing fascists in Nicaragua that were fighting the Sandinistas. and they were transporting it to drug dealers in Los Angeles and primarily black impoverished neighborhoods in the United States. And they would sell them to the drug dealers, and then the drug dealers would sell them to the people. So not only were they funding this right-wing US-backed fascist group in Central America, but they were dosing all of these black communities that had groups like the Black Panthers and real revolutionary groups emerging at the time, and dosed them with drugs. So it served a dual purpose for the ruling class, and that has never stopped. There's tons of corruption. The U.S. empire is deeply tied in with the drug trade that they're claiming to fight. So yeah, the fact that they're going after Venezuela right now, I think it's just the way the wind is blowing. I think that's just their focus right now because they need oil, right? The U.S. and Europe need oil because they're not getting it from Russia anymore. They're not getting energy from Russia. So a few months ago, they had to go to Venezuela and alleviate some of the economic sanctions and ask Venezuela for oil. That's the, specific commodity or specific resource that Venezuela has an abundance of. And it just so happens to be the specific resource the U.S. needs right now. So rather than the Mexican government being compromised or anything, I think the U.S. is focusing on Venezuela for economic reasons because they need energy. And they see Venezuela as the easiest target, somewhere where they've laid the groundwork for regime change for the last 20 some years. Whereas Mexico has just more recently started moving in this socialist direction, and the U.S. has more recently started promoting regime change. In Venezuela, they've already put billions of dollars into backing the right wing and trying to overthrow the socialist government. So they already have operatives all over Venezuela. I think they're moving that direction with Mexico, the empire is. But right now, I think their focus is on Venezuela because they want that oil and because they feel like the Venezuelan government might be on the precipice of, or they might be vulnerable for a U.S. coup after 20 years of U.S. hybrid warfare against them, 27 years now, of sanctions and U.S. money going to right-wing Venezuelan forces on the ground. U.S. money and U.S. training. Thank you for that. Stealthy47, thank you as well. Pancho Villa mustache versus Stalin mustache. And what's the approximate opinion on Mexico's left-wing parties? I kind of just gave that. I like the Morena party, support them, think they're great. I'm sure there are contradictions there. I'm sure, some people in Mexico want them to take a more revolutionary approach and a less electoral approach. But what they're doing seems to be working. They're moving their country in a positive direction. 2 thumbs up to them. I don't know enough about Mexico to tell you about the specific parties and, splits within the Mexican left, but I know the Morena party is doing good, and their party program is the same program that the Mexican Communist Party had back in the day when they were fighting a guerrilla war in the mountains. So if that gives you any idea of what the Morena party is pushing for, they're basically pushing a communist program. Yeah, and I don't know. I guess I got to go with the Stalin mustache. Pancho Villa had a good mustache, though. Thank you, Stealthy. Bear, what up, Osos? Thank you for the $5 super chat, brother. Really appreciate that. Eddie, what's your take on the romanticized version of Shostakovich by Western historians and the villainizing of Stalin? I haven't read too much about Shostakovich. My lack of Soviet history or deep Soviet history here is showing again. But he was... I have read about this guy, actually. He had a complicated relationship with the government, right? He was like pro, but also really critical. And as the government, as the socialist government continued to be built, he turned against them more and more. And then what happens then is the more you, the CIA, and this gets to the Trotskyite to neocon pipeline, the CIA, especially at this time, would prey upon that. Anybody who bashed communism, anyone who bashed the government, anyone who bashed the Soviet Union, the CIA would give money, would prop them up either directly, by making that person an asset and propping them up directly, or indirectly, like they did with a lot of the Frankfurt School pseudo-Marxist thinkers. They just indirectly fund the journals that they're publishing in. So they turn these anti-Soviet people into intellectual celebrities. And then that encourages other people to act that way and bash the Soviet Union because they know that's the path to fame and fortune. So what became a really useful narrative for the US at that time was these people like Trotsky, who said the revolution was good, because it's hard to deny that the Bolshevik Revolution was good. They overthrew the Tsarist autocracy and overthrew the imperialist state, and they built the world's first worker state. So it's hard to deny that the revolution itself was good. But then you had these people who said, yeah, the revolution was good, but the socialist government that came after it was bad, right? The revolution was betrayed, as Trotsky said, by Stalin and all these other people who helped build up the world's first worker state and brought the USSR from this backwards feudal agrarian country into a world economic and political superpower. That became a very useful narrative for the CIA, and they started promoting people like Trotsky and people like Shostakovich, or anybody who would badmouth the socialist government, but who at first said the revolution was good, because that was a powerful narrative to give to Americans. Look, even the Russians are saying that their government is bad now. Even the people who supported the Bolshevik Revolution are now saying that, you know, they're authoritarian and evil and bad. That's a powerful narrative to tell to Americans. So that's the kind of people that they drifted towards. And a lot of these people were brought into the CIA, a lot of these Trotskyites, and eventually became neocons, or their kids became neoconservatives. That's what we call the Trot to neocon pipeline. But that's because the CIA thought Trotsky's narrative was very, very useful at the time, or other people who turned against the state. So, yeah, that's my opinion on that. And then, of course, they had to badmouth Stalin because Stalin was the opposite of that. Stalin was the one building that Soviet socialist state. He was the one lifting the workers out of poverty, or leading it. The workers lifted themselves out of poverty, but he was leading them to do that. Stalin was the one, you know, industrialize or helping to industrialize the country so they could defeat the Nazis. He was the symbol of socialism in practice, socialism in the real world. And what the CIA tried to do was take the American left and get them to not support socialism in the real world as it actually exists, but only this utopian, idealistic version of socialism that, you know, has never existed in practice, which makes them impotent and useless. If you reject any kind of socialism that's actually been put into practice, and you only support this idealist version of heaven that you invented in your head, then you're not actually going to support anything in practice. You know, someone like Vaush, who calls themselves a socialist, would never support a communist revolution in America. He would condemn it as authoritarian and violent and all these things. So these fake anti-existing socialism leftists are very useful for the CIA and always have been, whereas the pro-existing socialism left-wingers, like Stalin himself being the number one symbol of that at the time, were what they tried to demonize the most. So that, you know, you American, and this is why there are so many Trotskyites in academia too, because it gives you a get-out-of-jail-free card. You can say, yeah, I'm a Marxist, you know, I'm a communist. Marx was right about everything. I acknowledge his scholarship, but I don't support existing socialism. I don't support Marx's ideology actually being put into practice. I don't actually support class struggle. Only this idealist version of class struggle that I invented in my head that's never actually played out in practice. That's what the U.S. wants left-wingers to think like. They want left-wingers who only support socialism in their heads, but will never actually support socialism existing in the real world. That's even more useful for them than a right-winger, because they're able to convince other leftists and young people who are thinking about revolution and seeing problems with the system. It herds them into a compatible left, a left wing that won't actually challenge power and that will be impotent. So that's very important for the CIA. I don't know that much about Shostakovich, so maybe I'm bad-mouthing him too much. But that's my opinion on who the CIA propped up at that time versus who they demonized. Shostakovich's Symphony Number 2 is about the October Revolution. The final section is about Lenin. Worth a listen. Based. All right, hell yeah. Every single person needs to read Utopian and Scientific and the Purity Fetish every day until they get this. Absolutely. Right there, the Purity Fetish. If you become a $10 Midwestern Marx member or a $10 Midwestern Marx Patreon supporter, you get this book. You get the Purity Fetish so you can understand this exactly. Or you can just go to MidwesternMarx.com and buy the book outright. But this needs to be understood, and it's something that the Purity Fetish describes perfectly. And as Lucas here says, you also need to read Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific. There's a reason I'm always picking up that book and saying I want to beat American leftists over the head with it. It's because it's the number 1 book that they need to understand. And, I want to beat up American right-wingers with it because they're always saying Marxists support utopia. Marxists are utopians. We're the opposite. We want to build a better system from the conditions that we inherited. We want to take the society and the system as it exists currently and transform it. And in order to do that, you need to be pragmatic. You need to understand how the system actually works. You need to understand what can be implemented and what is popular with the people versus what's not, and what's infeasible and what we can't do overnight. Maybe some of our ideals and some of our goals can be accomplished with time, but we can't just do everything and invent a utopia overnight. Even in the process of constructing socialism, there are mistakes that need to be learned from and adjusted because we're human and humans make errors. And this is what Marx and Engels understood so well, which is why it's so infuriating when they get called utopians, because it's like they wrote a whole ass book about why utopias don't work. They were the left-wingers who were on the cutting edge of criticizing utopias. And scientific socialism is anti-utopia. But anyways. Shostakovich, song about Fuentes is killer. Love it. Thank you. Shostakovich refused to defect even when he had the option to. Okay, so I was being too harsh on Shostakovich. He sounds based, actually. So you can just take my last rant. Maybe doesn't apply to Shostakovich, but it applies to Trotsky and other people. Red Bar is socialist? Maybe. Maybe. That's why he criticizes all those capitalist comedians. Red Bar reference. That's not what I expected to see today. Let's play this banger again, shall we?
He said, she said, we got plans to unfold. You'll be a hero, so brave, so bold. Nick's cracking head with the money, he traded stands for a brand new league. Change your tune, put on a show. You're the perfect church, let it flow. He got the call. He got the call from the man with the charge and the sprawl. He said, run, and he said, crawl. He got the call, yeah, he got the call. He was sipping his soda, head in the clouds. When the phone lit up, it was ringing loud.
Too good. This is so important to what we're talking about here with scientific socialism. The culture, the geography, the demographics are all factors in how communism manifests regionally. It's a science, 100%. And America is a big country, so it might manifest differently in other places, or the way that class struggle needs to be waged might be different in different places. And the Black Panthers were kind of on the cutting edge with this, reaching their communities, right? Their strategies were designed to help these majority Black redlining afflicted regions that were dealing with the legacy of Jim Crow apartheid, and organizing and educating and doing mutual aid for the people in those specific communities. They understood their specific cultural, geographic, economic, every different factor you can think of. They understood those conditions. And I think I think the CPUSA didn't do this as well. I think the Panthers are a better example. As much respect as I have for William Z. Foster and the CPUSA, they were kind of just taking the position of Moscow. They were just kind of following Moscow. And that became a problem because they weren't applying Marxism to uniquely American conditions. They were trying to copy and paste what Russia did onto America, which doesn't work. Whereas the Panthers had more ability and more aptitude for applying Marxism to America's unique concrete conditions, whether they're cultural conditions, economic conditions, racial conditions, all sorts of things like that. I think the Panthers are a better example of how that's done in America than the CPUSA was. And I think that's actually a place where we can criticize the old CPUSA and say, this is where the American Communist Party can do better. And that's what Carlos's other book, Why We Need American Marxism, is about, applying Marxism to specifically American conditions, adapting it to our time period and our conditions. And you also get that book by becoming a Midwestern Marx Patreon supporter. So you'll get the Purity Fetish and Why We Need American Marxism for just $10. That's a great deal, folks. What? He got it so hard. He got that call. Absolutely. Nice to hear your broadcast of capitalist propaganda. This must be a Trotskyite. One more time.
Nick, my boy, it's time to go.
Pack up your thoughts, your slogans too. There's a new agenda waiting for you. He got the call. He got the call from the man with the hat and the wall. He said, jump and talk. We got plans to unfold. You'll be a hero. So. Nick's cracking head for the money we he traded stands for brand. Change your tune. Put on a show. You're the perks, just let it flow. He got the call.
If I am a trot, I thought he said I am a trot. You are an FBI CIA dupe. Well, so you are a trot? Because you're saying I'm a spreading capitalist propaganda. So you do think I'm CIA. So you're saying you are a trot? In that case, you should look up the history of your people being in the CIA. There haven't been many Marxist-Leninists in the CIA, but there have been a whole lot of Trotskyites, and a whole lot of your people have become neocons. Not so much of a thing in our tradition, but whatever you say, buddy. I would look a little bit more into the history of your own ideology there. But anyways, you guys, this has been a friggin' awesome stream. This was so fun. I had to go for 3 hours because I was having so much fun. Thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you for all the super chats. Thank you for talking about video games and movies with me, even if that's not your thing. I appreciate you guys indulging me. It was fun. I plan to engage in more pop culture analysis in the future. People like movies. People like video games. So it's a good way to reach them with Marxism. The same way that I try to reach people with mixed martial arts on my MMA TikTok account. So we'll do more of that. Thank you all for enjoying it. Thank you, Bear. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Jason. Thank you to all our longtime viewers and our YouTube members. This guy with the 00 username. You guys know who you are. All of you who are here consistently, I appreciate the crap out of you. We're building something amazing with the American Communist Party. We will change this country. Do not be nihilistic. Be optimistic. The future is bright. The American left has come such a long way in the last 5 years, even if the situation still seems bleak. I promise you, we're making progress. We're moving in the right direction. But we need you. We need your help. So join up at acp.us. Join the struggle. Let's take our country back. Am I right? All right, everyone. Let's be like Adelgard from the Black Eagles in Fire Emblem 3 Houses and unite our country and abolish the antiquated class system, even if we have to put our own lives at risk to do it. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Red salute.
Stand up, all victims of oppression, for the tyrants fear your might. Don't cling so hard to your possessions, for you have nothing if you have no rights. Let racist ignorance be ended, for respect makes the empires fall. Freedom is merely privilege extended, unless enjoyed by one and all. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. Let no one build walls to divide us, walls of hatred nor walls of stone. Come greet the dawn and stand beside us. We'll live together or we'll die alone. In our world poisoned by exploitation, those who have taken, now they must give. And end the vanity of nations, we've but one earth on which to live. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in the song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. And so begins the final drama, in the streets and in the fields. We stand unbowed before their armor, we defy their guns and shields. When we fight, provoked by their aggression, let us be inspired by life and love. For though they offer us concessions, change will not come from above. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International